All right, I'm here with Bren.
Vezaralu.
I got him to pronounce his last name because I'm not good at pronouncing anything. But what we're going to talk about today is eco, the most kind of hot topic there is in jiu-jitsu, which has been a hot topic for a couple of years now, and something I really love to talk about. And who better to talk to with than Bren, because Bren is a big time eco nerd, and I don't mean that like rudely. Like he just knows so much that I think I know a good amount, but he makes me feel like I don't know anything. So he's a good guy to talk to. And we'll just start off with Bren. Can you tell us a little bit about your, I guess, credentials in eco, and what got you into eco?
Sure. So I did my master's in kinesiology. So I just finished that in December. I did my master's project on applying ecological dynamics to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So that was a big thing. Did my master's project was also a course I did. So that was all put together. I presented that to like professors and they were all looking at it.
Yeah.
I don't think they had any really useful feedback for the course side. They were mostly like, this is cool. But on the paper, that was like kind of an academic thing. And then working on getting that published now with Jeff Wagman and my advisor, Emily Wughalter. And I've just been digging deep into that world and kind of getting exposed to all the stuff and going to the conferences, meeting everyone, and really awesome community of really, really smart people all around the world.
Yeah, if you say they're smart, I believe you because you're pretty smart yourself. And I guess the first thing I want to talk to you about is some of the more controversial kind of opinions when it comes to teaching jiu-jitsu. Because some people that are very eco, they're very strict and stringent of you can't show people stuff, or even if they don't say that, that's kind of how they imply it. And it makes people believe that that's true, that you can't show people things. But it seems to me that it's in the scientific evidence that, it's okay to show people things. It's kind of just like when, where, how, that kind of stuff. So can you just tell us about your opinion when it comes to, demonstration, showing people kind of stuff and whatnot?
Yeah. So it's a big misconception a little bit that people think about ecological dynamics and the ecological approach as like, oh, you just don't coach, right? You just don't show anything and you just like have them spar, right? And actually it's just a totally different method of how we teach, right? Based on a different understanding of how we learn, how we perceive, how we coordinate movement, right? And like, what is the...
Sorry, I'm just going to change I'm going to put it more towards your mouth.
Perfect. And also like, what is the fundamental unit of analysis, right? Are we thinking about the brain? Are we thinking about movement patterns as being stored in the brain? Are we thinking about what is the body doing? What is the movement that your body did when you did an armbar? Or are we thinking about the relationship between you and the environment and how that dynamic changes and emerges as you do an armbar, right? Mm-hmm. So when we have this understanding of movements as being self-organized, rather than the brain controlling it like a puppeteer would control a puppet, it makes a lot more sense to use tasks and let the body figure out how to accomplish the goal when we want to do functional things. So if we're concerned about, in jiu-jitsu, what our sport incentivizes is achieving functional outcomes. We don't actually care about how you do things. We don't care how your armbar looks. If the other guy taps, you win. There's a little bit of, you could say they're aesthetic criteria, but they're really become performance criteria when they're integrated into the scoring criteria, right? There's certain things that make mount score, right? You have to have both knees down on the mat, or, at least one knee, it depends on the specific organization and all that. But those become performance criteria. And so now that gets integrated into what we consider a functional outcome, right? That's not really an aesthetic criteria anymore. That's something that scores you points. So in jiu-jitsu, winning competitions is all about achieving those functional outcomes. We never care about, no one cares how bad the armbar is if it works. No one cares how ugly your mount is, compared to, the ideal of what we teach in a fundamentals class. If you get it and you hold it and you're able to achieve functional outcomes, you're able to get submissions, you're able to hold people down, you're able to do it efficiently and skillfully, right? and do what you want from there. So when we think about showing people things, the first thing is we have to think about, what are we trying to do, right? Because we can have different goals, right? Jiu-Jitsu doesn't have to be about just winning competitions. That's the first thing, right? Jiu-Jitsu, you might say, I just want to learn the techniques. I want to be able to, kind of like judo, look at all the kata. I want to see all the different moves, and I want to be able to do them on video and have it look great, right? That's a different thing. And if that's what you want to do, then, you want to use a traditional approach. You want to use explicit instruction, right? You want to be drilling that and having expert feedback and having people tell you, your knee's in the wrong place, and then you need your hand to grip here, and then this, the other thing, right? But where ecological dynamics comes in really helpful for jiu-jitsu is because we're generally trying to achieve those performance criteria, right? We're generally trying to win. We're trying to pass the guard. We're trying to get submissions. We're trying to hold different dominant positions, right? And tasks generally do a lot better for that. So when it comes to showing people things, giving them verbal feedback, we call it augmented feedback in the literature if people look into it. And there's all sorts of different feedback. But if you want to look into the literature on feedback, look into augmented feedback, because a lot of the feedback we get is just internal, right? Your body is getting feedback and information from all sorts of different things. So when we look at the research on augmented feedback, it's generally helpful in complex skills. So if we have simple skills, things like key pressing tasks, right? Where you're on a computer screen and the screen tells you, like, press this series of numbers, right? And maybe you practice that or you did a study on it. Sometimes for things like that, feedback can hold you back. And groups with less feedback, or sometimes even no feedback, can do better than groups with a lot of feedback or feedback after every iteration. But in general, in those complex skills, feedback is helpful. And demonstrations are helpful. So there's some good research showing that demonstrations don't really reduce the quality of search, but they can just change where you're searching. And so you imagine if you're a beginner, you're trying to do something new. If I just give you a task, okay, you're a beginner, you've never done jiu-jitsu before, okay, like, get a takedown, go. There's a lot of different things you could try. Again, if you're motivated, you'll start searching, you'll start finding things. But it might be helpful to say, like, hey, grabbing the legs is a good idea, and showing, here's how that could look. And you show them what a single leg looks like, or you show them what a double leg looks like. Or if you're a little crazy, you show them what a lat drop looks like, right? You can show them these things. And the idea is, the more we constrain what people can do, the more we limit the power of self-organization. So in general, the more we leave it open, where people can accomplish these tasks in all sorts of different ways, the more room we leave for their body to figure out different optimal solutions for them and the environment and the dynamics they're facing.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense for sure. I find that when I do demonstrate, which I do more than I always do, like when I show a game, I'm always showing a lot of different options, saying this is something you can do.
Yeah.
This is something that I find very helpful, that kind of stuff. And I find people really do mimic what I show. It's like it makes a huge impact on the game, what people are doing. And I don't think so in a way where it's like making them less creative. I think that it's really aiding them, but which, some people think the opposite. Some people, they want to explain the game and they don't want to do any demonstration, or they might even show something wrong intentionally.
Yeah, sure.
And I've always found that to be a bit crazy. And I just want to get, I guess, your point of view of like, yeah, like, do you think that that's a bad route to go, of like not showing people stuff at all, like demonstration, or like intentionally doing things wrong?
So I think something you might be talking about here is there's some literature on like enhancing the error. So when someone's doing a move, you could say like, don't do this wrong, right? And that's wrong, fix that. But there's some research showing if you actually say like, do that worse, like in baseball, they might say something like, okay, I want you to hit the ball into like the first baseman. And they're like, well, that's a terrible idea. I'll get out. They normally try not to do that,
Yeah, yeah.
right? That's a bad thing. But there's some research showing if you enhance that error and you do some practices that enhance that error, they can actually learn better how to not make that error, right?
Yeah.
Again, like we were talking about yesterday, a lot of it really comes back to constrained to afford, constrained to explore. Are you exploring something new? In general, with ecological dynamics, with the understanding of this framework, we think a lot about exploring the solution space. And rather than, installing this perfect motor solution into your brain to be recalled, if we're thinking about it that way, then it's like, oh yeah, we don't want to introduce errors because like now you're screwing up the program you're recalling, right?
Mm.
Now you maybe when you're stressed or in a competition and you need to use the armbar and then the move you recall and then do is bad. We screwed it up by telling you to do that thing wrong. We don't think that's the case at all. And again, there's evidence, a lot of evidence in a lot of different areas to suggest that. One of them is this enhance the error thing. It's generally helpful. And it's generally more helpful than telling them not to make that error. And again, that makes sense when we think about it in terms of exploring the solution space of all the different things we can do. If you understand what the error is and how you can make it, that makes it easier. Again, not just in the cognitive way, in a physical, embodied, dynamic way. If you understand how to make the error, you understand how not to make the error.
That can make sense to me. I guess the question I have is, it can be helpful to demonstrate things correctly, but it can also be helpful to not demonstrate or show things incorrectly. So how do you really know when to go about, what you're going to do?
So I don't think I would ever demonstrate something incorrectly. I might put people in a position that I know is not going to be good. Like one thing that comes up a lot is when you show people an entanglement and like, what's the first thing every beginner does? Like they have no idea, like what's a single leg X? They put their feet on all the wrong places, right? Mm-hmm. And one thing I started doing that was very helpful was not correcting them. Like just run it and you're going to get smashed because that's not a single leg X. But now you get to attune to all the information that comes from that, right? You get to feel what getting smashed is like from having a bad single leg X or X guard or whatever the guard is, right? You don't get that opportunity or you don't get it as much, and certainly not in the same way when, okay, we need to just fix it. We need to fix it. You put that foot here, put this foot here. We're taking up time doing that. And then now we run it from the perfect single leg X, right? The other thing about not showing things, I think that then it depends on the skill level, right? We want exploration. So where I see not showing things could be really helpful is one, like we got to think about time, right? Coaching is not like a net neutral thing. Training is not a net neutral thing. We have all sorts of things that we know we can be doing that are really helpful for people. Any time that we spend doing anything could be spent doing something productive, and we have to compare it in relation to that. So any time that we spend giving demonstrations, we know that can be helpful, and we know that can be helpful in certain scenarios, but we also have to think, is that better than other things we could be doing? So that's one scenario. Like if, you spend 3 minutes showing, here's a single leg, here's a double leg, here's, this, that, here's a Uchimata, and they're all, experienced or expert players that they've seen those a million times. That's not helping them at all. And especially if those are the only things they do, and then you're kind of reinforcing them to like, those are the only things you can do from here. Yeah. Maybe they're exploring less. And so maybe you can get more exploration and save time by cutting out the explanations.
That makes sense. Yeah, that it depends on the skill level.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think probably for beginners, I think showing demonstrations is going to be pretty helpful.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree with that it can definitely depend, because I could see scenarios where like, you're kind of showing the obvious examples, and the advanced people, it's obvious to them too. So they only stick with those. And yeah, they might be more creative if you don't. And I like what you said too about, there's only so much time in the class, so you need to use it efficiently. And that is kind of one argument against doing anything without resistance, because I think most would agree that it isn't completely useless, but they would say, well, there's better things you could be doing.
Yeah.
Right. But a little controversial in the eco space, but I still see some value in having people do some things without resistance. But I do, understand that there's this trade-off that you could be doing something with resistance that has the full signal to attune to compared to having less signal when it's non-resisting. So I think that'll be a really good topic to talk about as well.
For sure. Yeah. We were talking about, had a good
Yeah.
chat about this yesterday.
I talk about this a lot. And just to kind of frame this, I teach most of my classes CLA 100%, live 100%. Maybe like every other or every third class will spend like 5 minutes or so doing something without resistance. But it's also because of my room and what I think that my room wants. Because like you've said, we've talked about before, that coaching isn't only about skill acquisition. It's also about, there's other things you could do, things for other reasons of like, making someone feel comfortable, or they feel like they learned something. And I still find that, especially for recreational people, like a really good thing, like leaving, okay, I learned how to do, I don't know, a reverse X guard saddle entry. I learned how to do that. I know how to do that. That's a really productive class. I also did a lot of stuff live, like everything else live, but I learned this cool thing. I'm going to explore this. But let's just kind of rehash our conversations we've had. And let me get your opinion on doing things without resistance. If you think it's completely useless, or there is some use cases, all that kind of stuff.
You definitely get something out of it, right? Like, I'm a big believer that any movement you do, any training you do, you get something out of it. Like, there probably are situations where I don't like the whole like reinforcing bad habits or like making bad habits things. In ecological dynamics, we have this word we call attractors, right? Which is basically like, think of it as habits. Habits, attractors, like places where behavior tends to go. There are ways that you can show things or do things where maybe you're reinforcing attractors that aren't productive. But if there's certain things like if there's resistance in the task and you have to win something productive in jiu-jitsu to win the task, people are really not going to like stay in those attractors that aren't useful. Maybe there are attractors that are like counterproductive, right? I think those generally get figured out pretty quickly, especially if the tasks are designed well. Maybe there's a lot of things of attractors that are neutral that are a little harder to break, right? It's harder to figure out things that just don't make an impact either way, to remove those from your practice. So I really think any sort of training we do, we get something out of it almost all the time. And doing jiu-jitsu without resistance is absolutely one of those, right? In a way. So I was thinking about it a good amount since our chat yesterday. Maybe a way to think about it is you're adding an enormous constraint. You're removing an enormous amount of critical information for grappling and jiu-jitsu, right? So you're removing all the information about what the partner can do to stop you from doing what you want to do, which is the most critical thing. Yeah. But there still is all the information. There's still two bodies.
Yeah.
They're still going to tell you when they tap, right? They're still going to tap. And you're still moving your body, and you're moving your body in ways that are specific to jiu-jitsu. So there's definitely scenarios like one thing I could imagine. And when we were talking about this yesterday, when we think about things without resistance, when we can turn them into tasks with resistance, I think it's almost always better. And I think if you think about it pretty hard, you can find ways to do that with almost everything. But like one sort of scenario where I might imagine that is like if you have people where they're struggling with the mobility a little bit for level changes, maybe there's a task I love doing that with. So the task is just, okay, and we're standing and we just need to connect to each other's hips. If I just connect my chest to your hips or one leg, or you connect your chest to my hips, like, that's a win. I need to prevent you from connecting my hips, and I need to connect to yours. That's a really great way to get people to learn level changes with some resistance, with some representativeness. But maybe if you have someone like really old or like really immobile or maybe like pretty apprehensive about doing that stuff, you might say, hey, let's take out the resistance for a second. And I want you to just practice different ways to explore how you can connect to my hips and just try all sorts of different movements, explore that space, right? And so I was actually, speaking of which, I actually was doing that task with someone. He was a white belt. And when we were doing, I was just beating him every time. I was just connecting to his hips every time, and he wasn't really shooting for legs. And so I said, but I didn't go straight to no resistance. What I went to was, okay, I'm not going to use my arms now. And I said, okay, we're removing a lot of things. But then that made it comfortable enough for him to try it. But maybe if that still was too much, then the next thing would have been, let's try just doing the movements. I'll just kind of stand here and maybe walk around a little bit, right? How can we keep as much of that representativeness as possible, but then allow you to start exploring a solution space? So the thing is, like, again, if the resistance is too challenging for you to explore what that solution space is like, then maybe we have to, then we can ease it back if we need to. If there's no other ways we could do it, then it might be the most optimal thing sometimes. And so one of the things we were talking about yesterday was one of our coaches, shout out to Yifan, he showed us north-south choke last week. And a lot of people don't do north-south chokes. Like, it's one of those weird things, and I don't either. I've never done them. That's never been a part of my game. I've probably been shown it once or twice, probably drilled it, but back with the traditional thing, and never stuck, never was able to pull it off. So he was showing it, and he was talking about, like, it's a sort of move where it's hard to do physically. You've got to get the alignment just right. So he had us explore doing it. He showed, here's how you do it. Here's what you want to pay attention to. And he's like, okay, now try to do it with your partner. Try to get them to tap, no resistance. And for me, that was perfect, right? Because if there was resistance, it would have been like, I would have just, if the goal was, okay, start in side control, submit your partner. I'm going to do an armbar. I'm going to Kimura. I'm going to all sorts of other things. I'm not going to try to get a north-south. And maybe if I did with full resistance, it might be pretty hard. But like, first, exploring that a little bit without resistance, like feeling there's still information there. There's still critical information about how do you get the partner to tap? How do you get the pressure on both sides of the carotid arteries, from this sort of area, right? So you get to attune to that, and then, now I'm starting to get the hang of it. Let's start bringing back some of that representativeness. So let's figure out the position, get there, and then, okay, let's start. Okay, now you try to get out, and I'll try to tap you.
Yeah, and when you were doing it without resistance, like, the way I would view that is that you're attuning to the information of the finish itself. You've taken away the the information of, like, control of, controlling the person and not letting them escape. Like, that information isn't present, right? But when there's so much information to attune to, when you go live right away with something like that, it can just be harder to focus on, okay, how do I finish, while I'm thinking about how do I control and keep this person down. So I think that example is a good one of being like, yeah, let's use this non-resistance to just attune to the finish itself. And now let's add in the additional information that's critical to get good at the skill. Mm-hmm. But yeah, you could do so without doing that first portion. But I think that just having less information there to attune to is just helpful in that scenario, at least.
Yeah. Again, especially for me, like, I've been grappling for a long time. I have, if the task is like hold the person down, I can do that. If the task is pass guard, I can do that. Get them out to do that. Like, all those things. I can do that against very skilled people. And so, because of that, those are attractors. I tend to go there. And so to shift and explore and build a new attractor, sometimes we have to do some crazier stuff, right? We have to bend the rules a little. Yeah, and maybe that means, pull back the resistance a little. right? Pull back the representative list a little when we need it.
Exactly. And I think that, yeah, definitely for experienced people, because like me as well, I know how to control someone, and I can attune to that information pretty well. But like if I want to learn something new, and I did recently, I learned this cool ankle lock. I don't know what it's called, but it's like when they peel off your foot, they bring their hips over. I can't really give a great explanation through verbally, but yeah, then you throw your leg over, and it's this really cool ankle lock that I never knew existed. But for a while, but then I started seeing it, and people started doing it on me. I'm thinking like, what is this? And I tried to do it from like what I'd seen, and I couldn't quite get it. But then I asked my friend Mike, Uki Mike, I said like, how do you do this? Can you show me? And then, I tried it a couple times on him. I was like, wow, this is really cool. And I started hitting it. And then I showed it in a class where we had done prior, we had done some just ankle lock type of CLA. And then I just said, okay, guys, I'm going to show you guys this really cool ankle lock. And then, they did it without resistance for like 5 minutes. And no one jumped down my throat trying to kill me. Don't write an article about me. I'm sure someone will, but yeah. And then we went back to the CLA, and then people were using it. They were.
I mean, that's still the CLA though, right?
But we had that 5 minutes in between I know it's still CLA, right?
Right. You're just showing a demonstration.
Yeah.
And it's just heavily constrained.
Yeah.
Right.
That's exactly it. But I mean, then people could maybe apply that to everything of like, well, doing technique, that's just a form of CLA. Let's just keep doing the same thing. But
yeah.
But then again, the problem is like, why are you doing it? If you're trying to build a motor program, then that's when the problem arises. Because people still, I'll be like, I think a little bit of unresisted practice tasks can be good, but then they'll be like, oh, IP, he's IP. And it's like, no, I don't even think you understand what you're talking about if you think that that's IP, personally.
Yeah, I had the same, Cal Jones and I were talking about this. Like, he'll sometimes, new people will come in, and he'll have them, like, sometimes drill the throw with no resistance.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe drill is a strong word, but, like, certainly explore the throw with no resistance and explore falling with no resistance. That's not a traditional approach. He has an understanding of what we think, how we think perception and movement and all this stuff is happening. And so what he chooses to do with the practice task based on that understanding is up to him. It's an ecological approach because he's using that framework to approach training and teaching.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's what it comes down to. And that's why I hate the argument of like, when I think people on like the non-eco side can sometimes like, they don't really know. So they're like, oh, why can't you do both? And then the other side is like, you can't do IP and direct perception. They don't mix. But I don't think that's what they're meaning when they're saying that, because I didn't mean that when I said it either. I just meant like, why can't you do games and show technique? I didn't mean like, why can't you do IP and eco, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of like a disingenuous kind of argument almost.
That's interesting. That's a really interesting one. So here's the way I think about it. I think the more you understand ecological dynamics, the less, so like the word drill is really specific.
Yes.
Because that kind of refers to, like, for me, a few things. It's you're showing a specific movement, you're asking people to do that movement, and you're asking them to do it specifically that way, and then you're having them repeat it many times with the idea of installing it somewhere, somehow, right? With an ecological approach, you're never doing all of those things. You may show the move, you may ask them to try to do that sort of thing, but there's still an understanding that you're exploring a solution space of many different ways to achieve that outcome. It just, like, they all look pretty similar.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the way I view it too. Now that Cal was the one that kind of explained it to me, that drilling has a connotation where it's more like rote repetition. It comes from the military of like, do the march exactly the same, be uniform with your people, right? But I think that most instructors don't necessarily think that. I think they might not even know kind of what they think, in a sense. They just do it the way they've been shown. But I also think they don't think like a motor program is being built. Maybe some of them, but I don't know.
I think they think they're installing something in the body. Yeah, I think the word motor program would only be used by like more educated
Yeah,
coaches for sure.
Sure.
But so there is something that like ecological dynamics is fundamentally irreconcilable with mental representations, with indirect perception, with like the traditional approach, right? Like there's no hybridizing. Like hybrid is the traditional approach, right? But there's a way, like we were talking about, maybe not drilling, but there's certainly a way where, and times and use cases where showing moves and having people explore a specific thing can be really useful from an ecological approach. And that really depends on the sport, right? We've been talking about jiu-jitsu, and jiu-jitsu is a very functional sport. But in something like figure skating, you're using tasks a lot less because now you've got a book that tells you what all these skills have to look like.
Yeah.
So you can still have an understanding of direct perception and all this stuff and like be on that train. And then at some point, and you still got to say, well, we need it to look like this though, because that's what you're getting graded on, because that's what performance in this sport looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
That doesn't make it not an ecological approach.
I mean, even in jiu-jitsu, like, I don't want to say like I don't know how to kind of say this, but like, I think that form does matter in a sense, not where it's like, but like it correlates with functionality, I think, right? Because like a good looking double leg takedown is probably going to be a functional takedown, and a poor looking double leg is probably not going to be. But I don't mean like 100% of the time, because there's, Jordan Burroughs, he like dives for takedowns. I do too, actually. And people criticize me for this. Sometimes I dive into like a single or whatever, but I get a hold of the leg and I'm pretty good when I have it. But I mean, I'd rather like shoot with like good stance of like, my shoulders over my hips, that kind of stuff. It's more like I can kind of get away with it because I'm athletic, but like I would say.
But then we have that thing, right? Oh, we're just getting away with it because it's a bad technique. But at what point do we say, you're a goddamn black belt? That's not bad technique. That's successful functional skill.
Yeah, I agree. But, okay, I would say like someone that's like even like just less strong than me, someone that's less fast than me, if they shoot from far out, I'm going to, F them up. You know what I mean? Like,
Sure.
yeah, like you shouldn't have done that. You should have shot a little bit closer, right? So I think that, like,
but it depends on the athlete too,
yeah,
right?
It does.
Because like Jordan Burroughs might do that and pull it off. Is that non-functional now?
Yeah,
probably not.
Or like, Kamzat too. Kamzat shoots from far. Yeah.
And Andre brought up last night. He was saying, who's had the most knockouts in the UFC? Derek Lewis.
That's true.
It's like, and then he was saying, like, he could walk into a boxing gym, and someone would say, if they didn't know who he was, someone might say, dude, you're doing this all wrong. You've never boxed in your life. You're just really strong.
Yeah. But let me give an example though. So, okay, we went over anaconda chokes yesterday a bit. And elbow positioning is something that really matters. When you have your elbow low to the ground, your forearm is better lined up with their soft part of their neck where their carotid artery is. And if you have it high up, then you're mostly going to be crushing their armpit. But you definitely can tap someone with shitty elbow position. And if I see someone with, shitty elbow position, I would probably tell them, hey, drop your elbows, see how this goes, see if it helps you more, right? And like I can see it and, make changes based off that. So it is kind of a model in a sense, but it isn't this like motor program model.
Yeah.
So how do you,
No, but that's just like an understanding. Like you could see that as like some sort of invariant, right?
Mm-hmm. But is it though? Because you can potentially still choke someone with poor elbow position.
For sure, but there's not really any such thing as a universal invariant. Okay. And again, when I'm saying invariant like this is not technically the way we use invariance in ecological psychology. Mm-hmm. We're gonna just leave that out. Yeah. We would call it the definition of the word, which is something that stays the same throughout a transformation, right? So that elbow positioning, let's see it as like a property of many different types of chokes that is semi-constant, right? It's somewhat conserved, like we would say in biology. It's conserved. In biology, when you look at genes and you see, okay, you have some sort of important gene, one of the things we look at to say what's important in this protein is if we look at all sorts of different species, one, how many different species have this gene that codes for this protein? And then two, if we look at areas where they're the same across all these different species. If you have 100 different types, if you look at like from E. coli to yeast to humans to mice to cats, and they've all got this one gene, and this one sequence near the beginning is the same in every single type. Oh, something important's happening over there.
Yeah.
Right? Same way here. If you're doing the anaconda and you see that not all of them, but a lot of those anacondas have that good elbow positioning that's lower, you can be, you can have some confidence that that's something important, not something universal, but something important. And that's what you brought up there is an excellent example of when it would be a great time, in my opinion, to let someone know, hey, I noticed the other guy got out and you had the anaconda, you should have been able to finish it. I saw that your elbow was too high. If you try that with a lower elbow, I bet you'll be able to pull it off. And then now we run a task. Okay, get into it, get in this position, try to tap the guy.
Exactly. And that is another example I want to talk about too, because yesterday we talked about this and you didn't think it would be a good idea to have it no resistance for that specifically. And I really thought about our conversation there and kind of like what I described earlier of, I think that it'd be a good thing for anaconda specifically for a beginner to just try it a couple times without resistance, like explore it there, because they can just focus on the search area of the elbow without having to worry about the search of like controlling, keeping this person, right? So
it's true. Yeah. And the more they are a beginner, the more like it may just be really productive to do a front headlock task.
Yeah.
And so you're comparing it against that. So in isolation, if this is just an extra thing that you'd add, yeah, they're going to get something out of it. Would they get more out of doing something from front headlock?
That's the question.
I think so. I think much more. But then it comes back to the other thing we're talking about, where might they feel better that they've learned a specific move and they can go home and say, not, oh man, I just got beat up from all these different places, but like, okay, maybe I got beat up from all these different places and I learned an anaconda.
Exactly. That's what I'm thinking.
And so there's evidence for that. So we talked a little bit about the Coroner 2023 police self-defense study. So they have these police officers doing a knife defense. And so they have a traditional group, nonlinear pedagogy group. And so, traditional does like the traditional expert instruction, and they do a pre and post test. So they do like frontal stab attack, like frontal slash attack, then, some other slash attack, and then a surprise attack where they said like, look at your shoes untied. And then they did a 3-second thing. And then you just record how many times did they touch the guy, right? The nonlinear group had, I believe, a 4 times greater reduction in errors. They were caught a lot less by the knives. But when they talked to them after, they all said, oh, I wish we learned some moves.
Yeah.
I feel like I didn't learn any moves.
I'm not surprised. I really find that to be a challenge, specifically. I don't want to, talk shit. It's not like I'm talking shit about my class. I find my gi class a lot more wanting of stuff specifically than my no gi class. And my gi class is a bit of an older crowd, not like old people or anything, but just a bit older, a bit more masters in the gi class. And I find they just want some stuff, like they do like the CLA, but I think that they crave like the hybrid, which I know doesn't exist, right? But so like specifically, I think now like to myself before a class, like what can I show them that like they'll appreciate, that they'll feel like they learned something, and what CLA can I use to that that makes sense, and techniques that make sense for the CLA as well, because you don't want to show something without resistance that's just like a waste of time. Like a back escape is like a waste of time until they do without resistance. And a lot of, I think most like pinning things are right, but
Yeah.
I think more so of like complex movements or just like submission mechanics, that kind of stuff. Remove the resistance from time to time can be all right. But yeah, I definitely feel what people want is something that's not really talked about so much in the eco space, because I get the feeling that every coach in eco just thinks, well, this is the way people learn best. This is the way they're going to like it, and if they don't, then they can just go to a different gym, right? But like, I think that you can please both crowds, because I think some people don't want to do any or much static stuff, or I don't want to say static, like unresisting stuff, and some people do. So like, we talked about this yesterday as well, of like, I think group classes inherently have this problem that you can't make it perfect and ideal for absolutely every individual, and you almost need to what's the word I get, or phrase, like, I don't know, like,
Compromise.
yeah, I guess kind of like compromise in a sense, just for everyone. And that's what the group classes of any kind. And I think a lot of eco guys just say like, well, I just changed the constraints for other people that need it and stuff. And then it's like, it's perfect. Everyone's got what they need because I just changed the constraints. And that might be helpful for sure. But I think at the end of the day, you're going to find people that just want to learn some stuff too.
Yeah, and I think showing you're changing the constraints as well, right? I really don't think of that as not the CLA, as not an ecological approach when you're doing it from this understanding.
Yeah.
Right. But I think so. When we've talked about this a lot, motivation trumps everything. There's nothing you can do. There's nothing a student will do in one day or 1 month, or like if you want to go far, 1 year, that will really, like, it's not going to get them all the way, right? We're trying generally to do some big things that are going to take a long time, challenging skills that are going to take a long time to get any good at. And so you need them to come back.
Yeah.
And you need them to come back and keep coming back over and over and over again. And how you do that, how you get them to come back, trumps anything you can teach them in 1 day or month or week or year.
Absolutely.
And yeah, so if you need to show them some techniques and, like, God forbid, like, have them drill it, like, because that's what they like to do, and like that's what they do for fun, like, if that keeps them coming back, you're gonna get more out of that. They're gonna get more out of that. But I think the question becomes, how do we make sure people feel like they're learning something?
Mm.
And I think a lot of that, I notice a lot of, like, ecological coaches in jiu-jitsu, a surprising amount, they don't really say anything about what they're doing, right? It's like some of them get more intellectual, but a lot of them are just like, we're just doing tasks. Like, you're just going to spar and, like, cool. And they don't, like, say, like, oh, by the way, there's this huge framework that will be really interesting, and, at least for me, but I know it's very complicated. And so a lot of people avoid it. But I think one of the things that can happen with that, and one of the things that I've seen happen, is, people, especially people, ask for feedback. They ask, oh, can we see a way? All right, you win by escaping the back. Can you show me a way to do that? No. And then we don't always have to say no, but sometimes maybe we do. Especially like if everyone's waiting, probably not productive for everyone to see, like, one specific thing. If most people have an idea of how to do that. But if that person doesn't feel like, if they don't understand that there's a reason we're saying no, and it's not just about, like, I'm not just denying your request because I don't care about you as a person or student, but, well, actually I'm saying no because I think you'll learn more without us spending all this time on this technical solution that you may or may not use.
I agree. Yeah. Usually I'll tell people what they want, like the answer if they want to hear it. But sometimes I do kind of put my foot down. It's not the best term because it makes it sound like I'm being rude,
Sure.
but I'm not, I'm like being nice about it. I'm like, I could tell you, but I'd really just rather you try it because you're going to get so much more out of it. And yeah, I've had to say that, but I'm also not like super strict that way either. First off, I say it nicely, like I said. And two, it just depends what it is, because if people are trying the task, trying the game, and then they ask the question, then it's, yeah, I'll help you out. But if they're just so stuck on like, I need to know what to do first before I even try, that's where it gets a little more frustrating. It's like, please just try. And you'd be surprised, especially like if it's something just kind of basic, like, you know, how do I get my hips up higher from like mounts? It's, well, just try, you know, like I can't tell you, like, what can I tell you? Like, just, you know, yeah, like attack their arm.
Try to do it.
Yeah, exactly. Just try to do it. And the game we were playing was pretty like, you know, basic in a sense. Like, so yeah, but like I said, it was a bit of like a older crowd that I've had experiences like that with. They seem to be the ones that are less willing to just try it. Like, it's like they have ingrained into them that they need to know how to do it first. But yeah, that's why, again, I try to explain to them like what we're doing here. And yeah, I'm not super like strict about it either. So it just depends what it is and who it is. Like, I think that's the answer a lot when it comes to coaching and ecological type of stuff, is just, it depends.
Yeah. I know one solution that Rob Gray used and talked about in his book, because I think he's done some things coaching kids, and then he has some problems with the parents. The parents are like, what are you doing? You're not coaching because you're not showing them any moves. Why are you not showing them any moves? You just must not care about our children. And he said he had some success doing some presentations. Like, hey, here we're going to do this presentation on why we do things this way. And I think when people have an understanding of that, it's a lot more helpful. It's not that we don't care about it. Actually, we care about you a lot, which is why we put all this work into knowing and refining what we do and getting better at it so that we can help you more. And that's why we're doing things this way.
Exactly. I think it's really important to explain to people. And I think that when you play the games, or when you explain the CLA, the games, you should tell them why we're playing this game too, because I've ran into it many times where it's just like, this is the game, play it. That's it. It's like, well, shit, like, what are we working on? Why? That kind of stuff. Like, I like to like frame my classes before they start. If this is what we're working on today, this is why we're doing it. And just give kind of, examples as we go of like some demonstrations, kind of whatnot. Because I think if people don't have that context of why am I doing this, then I don't think it's going to be as concrete ingrained into them. I don't know if that's the right word to say, because it sounds like it's the motor program, but yeah.
They're not going to retain it as well.
Yeah.
Or maybe we won't develop skill as well. And so this comes back to focus on task goal. So this comes from optimal theory, and I've been raving about this stuff for a long time, but optimal stands for optimizing performance through intrinsic motivation and attention for learning. And so this is from Gabby Wolf and Rebecca Luthwaite. And the idea is very simple. The more you focus on task goal, the more students focus on task goal, athletes, whatever, the better you perform, the better you learn. Makes sense. And the whole theory meshes and merges really well into ecological dynamics. They both just like make sense together. And so her idea is like there's kind of three critical areas that feed into focus on task goal, or at least three that were ignored before. And so one of them is attentional cues. We talked about this. If we give someone an internal focus cue, their focus is on what body movements they're doing, versus an external focus cue that focuses on the effect of the movement, they're going to have better functional outcomes with the external focus cues. Because the internal focus cues, if I tell you like, okay, throw a dart at the wall behind you, and I want you to aim a certain place. I want you to make sure you throw the dart quickly or whatever. Something about how you throw, the effect you have on the dart, versus I tell you, I want you to focus on flicking the wrist at the end, or I want you to focus on extending the elbow. In a way, you could see that internal focus cue. That's a distraction away from the task.
Yeah, that's true.
You're not actually focused on the task. You're focused on how you do the task, how your body is moving as you do the task. That reduces focus on task goal. And then, the theory goes that that's how it works. But what we see in the empirical evidence is, however it works, people learn better with those external focus cues.
That's a really good example.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that makes total sense, because if you're thinking about your elbow and your hand and not the target, then that's at the forefront of your mind. Yeah, that's
Mhm.
a really good example.
Yeah. And then, so we talked about expectancies. So there's other research, a whole body of things about the higher people's expectancies. Again, we're assuming there's a higher focus on task goal, basically. And then that's increasing performance and learning. And so some of the ways we see that. So one of my favorite studies, you have people doing a golf task. You get a bunch of random people. Okay, you're going to go in two groups. In one group, we tell you, okay, so both groups, you have the same exact task. You got to hit the ball in that hole over there. One group, we tell you, like, if people that are good at golf, they'll hit it, let's say, within like 1 meter of that hole. The other group, you tell them, people that are good at golf, let's say, people that are good, they'll hit it within 5 meters of that hole. And so the people, when you tell them that, oh, within 5 meters of that hole is good, that makes them feel they have better expectancies of what they can do relative to other people. They have the exact same task, the exact same difficulty, but when they had higher expectancies of how they could do, they did better. And the idea is that it's through, the mechanism is through an increased focus on the task goal. And then the other area is autonomy. So when you give autonomy supportive language of when we show a move, we could say, this is the one way to do this move. If you do, this is how you do an armbar. If you do anything different, like, it's going to fail. This is the proper ideal thing. Or you could say, this is one way to do it. This could be a great way to do it, but like, try exploring different things. There could be other ways, right? When you support people's autonomy and how they learn, thing is, again, the idea is we have a higher focus on task goal. Because when you're focused on, oh man, I have to do it that one way, you're not really focused on doing the thing. You're certainly not focused on getting an armbar done.
Yeah.
You're focusing on, how do I do the armbar? Or when we support the autonomy, you're more focused on, how can I get it done? I have the autonomy to explore, and the solutions I find may be good. And then so people do better with the autonomy supportive language.
I think that is really where the traditional approach goes wrong, of like, instructors are like, this is the way you do it, and then they show like 10 different techniques. Then you go to roll and you're trying to remember those 10 techniques exactly how they showed it, and then it's like, a lot of those steps don't come up or aren't like important, and there's other ways of doing it, and just like confuses the shit out of you. And yeah, I think that's like really bad, because my first gym I ever went to, the classes were 2 hours long. Like, it was like 2 hours and 15 minutes, and the class portion itself was either an hour and 45 minutes or 2 hours, and it was just static drilling for like 2 hours. Yeah, and so like, I know better than anyone how much it sucks doing that, because that's like to the extreme. That's like literally a seminar every single class. And yeah, we're expected to remember all this stuff. Like, I can't remember shit. Like, I got ADHD, man. Like, I can't deal with this. So like, yeah, I found it really frustrating. And but again, that's such an extreme end of it.
Sure.
So yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I think that shows you right there. And that's where people have such a problem with the traditional approach, because I think even non-eco people know that the traditional approach is broken, of like, this isn't an optimal way to learn. And yeah, but then to me, I think that the reason that people don't come on board to eco is just because things are often said that kind of go against lived experience, of like, you learn something cool from someone, they showed you, you practiced it a couple times, and then you did it, or like maybe your instructor showed you and you did it, you have great success with it. And then again, people, they're not always well informed, but they might say something like, that isn't how we learn. Like, that's not
No
possible.
learning can happen like
Yeah,
that.
exactly. And it's like, well, that's not necessarily what's being said. It's just they were saying there's more productive ways of doing these things, not that they don't work at all. And again, I feel like when you frame it that way, it's just like, come on, man, like, give me a break,
Yeah, like, that can't possibly be right, because that is such a divergence from my lived experience.
Exactly.
And then the other thing that I notice comes up a lot is when you start talking about tasks, and like, tasks, not techniques. And then one thing people always gravitate to is like, oh, but I got this detail and it was so helpful. And you're telling me that, like, I can't do that, that's not helpful. No, no, I'm not, right? We're just saying like that shouldn't be the default mode of instruction
Yeah.
where we're just trying to give people detail, 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 detail. It has to
Exactly.
all be like this. But if we think about like, skill as emergent and dynamic in nature, and then we can give some feedback and details to support that, especially in areas that you're struggling with, great. No problems with that. None.
Exactly. I don't know. This probably isn't a great analogy, but like maybe like baking something and like, salt is important and helpful, but like you put too much salt,
Yeah.
it's going to ruin
Right.
your experience. Right. I think it's kind of the same with, teaching jujitsu in a sense where it's just like so much unresisting stuff, static repping. It's just like all this salt, like it tastes like so bitter. I don't want this. Right. But like I do like a little bit of salt, like a little salty,
That's a perfect analogy. I
Yeah.
love that. I'm going to use that. Yeah. Like think of details like salt.
Yeah.
Yeah. You add a little bit to the meal. It's great.
Yeah.
But you try to make a meal out of salt.
And you can ruin it quickly with too much salt.
Maybe it's still edible.
Exactly.
Like,
Yeah, you need just the right amount because you can like when it comes to teaching, you tell someone too much, like they can't remember that at all. I'm sure you know better than I do, but when it comes to memory, I remember something about like the reason why phone numbers are 7 digits is because people can only remember like around 7 things, right? So like if you give someone all these details, like they're like, I can't remember any of this stuff, you know?
Yeah. I mean, that goes into a whole nother rabbit hole.
Yeah. Well, we're pretty good at going through rabbit holes. We've been through a bunch of rabbit holes.
Right.
But one thing I wanted to get your perspective on too is your kind of, saying that the eco space in general is doing things a bit wrong where in jiu-jitsu, where they're over constraining games and not enough submissions, that kind of stuff. And before I get your perspective, I just want to share mine too, which is I have been to some eco classes where I was like, damn, I know exactly what Bren is talking about. This is way too constrained. And I don't like doing it. Like I literally didn't like doing the class and I didn't think I was getting any better jiu-jitsu. So it was just like, I'm doing something I don't want to do and I'm not benefiting from it. So I could see clear as day, like how easy it can be to over constrain. But yeah, I want to get your full opinion on that.
Yeah. So I think the core of the issue, it's kind of like a lot of people are applying linear pedagogy, traditional sort of instruction mindset or thought process around we isolate techniques, right? So traditional approach, we isolate techniques. We do, we would call it out of context. They would say, oh, we're just doing it, right? We're trying to do it perfect and we need to remove resistance to do that. But so you do that and then you rep it and then you have it installed and then you can recall it in more stressful scenarios and you maybe progressively or maybe all at once jump into that, right? I think the status quo right now with most of the coaches using ecological dynamics is they're applying that mindset to a kind of ecological understanding of movements, right? So they're saying, okay, we don't have motor programs, but we do have skills. And then the idea is then let's isolate those skills and let's constrain people to force those skills to emerge, to force them to develop those skills. And in doing that, when we do that in isolation, we are assuming, one, we're pulling out tons of critical information that learning can happen on. Education of attention and intention cannot happen on information and variables that aren't present in your practice environment, right? So we pull those out. We say no submissions, no this, no that. You can't win by this, you can't win by that. The only thing you can do is this one very specific thing. Fight for inside position, fight for underhook, fight for hands on top, fight for, whatever the specific thing you want to do is. And then we have a whole bunch of tasks and maybe a series of tasks. And we say, okay, we isolate this skill, we isolate that skill, we isolate that skill, we isolate that skill. And then at the end, we have an open round, we put it all together and like, we're great, right? And so, oh, hold on. That's the traditional approach. Like just kind of applied with some ecological understanding, right? It's in a way, it's like it's a carryover of one of my coaches, Sean Divney. He was talking about a lot, like when he was starting to get into it, he was saying how he was trying to really rewind. He's been so deep in all this stuff. He's teaching, coaching, training for a long, long time. And so he's learning all this ecological dynamic stuff, and he was trying to take the concepts he understood from jiu-jitsu traditionally and then map that onto an understanding of ecological dynamics. And generally, you can do a lot with that, but there are ways where then that you just can't map those concepts. It just doesn't work anymore. And I think this is one of those. We don't want to be isolating things anymore. We're treating them as not existing in isolation, right? And what skill really is, especially in something as dynamic and complex as in jiu-jitsu, is being able to play between all the different things and make something work, make something happen, put them together, right? And we don't get any of that when we start isolating one, when we treat skills like they're Lego blocks and we can just, collect them all, put them together at the end, and like you were saying, kind of plug and play games, like plug and play skills, isolate all those skills, and then put them together, and then we're good.
Exactly. That's what it seems like. It seems like these people kind of treat it like a recipe almost, where, okay, you have this skill, you have this skill, this skill. We did these 3 games, so you have these 3 skills. Now we put it together, you guys are good to go. But like, yeah, I mean, it's missing a lot of, information. If you can't do this, can't do that, it's so constrained. Because I ran into this problem too, and I'm still not like, I'm not like perfect at game creation right now. I think I'm pretty good, better than ever. But like when I was starting before, yeah, definitely, I run into situations where someone would do something that like wasn't in the game, and they'd be like, "Can I do this?" And then my answer would be like, no. But then I think, why? Well, why can't they? So
Yeah.
like I'm like, I gotta reflect on my own games. Like, why couldn't they do that? Or if that was there for him and he's confused, like he should do it. So like, yeah, I could definitely see from my own experiences doing classes, like being a part of them and also running them, how quickly you can overconstrain and make it like not realistic at all.
Yeah. So one of the areas where I see this come up the most is with inside position, and rightfully so. Inside position. We were talking about like we got to change what our definition of inside position is, but inside position is a very important and powerful concept. And so, rightfully so, maybe we isolate that skill. Okay, but now hold on, because the whole point of we don't get any points or anything intrinsically valuable from getting inside position. You get it, you're down 2 points, you're down an advantage in a match anywhere, you get inside position, you don't get anything for it, you're still going to lose. It's only useful in its ability to facilitate something else functional in the sport.
Yeah.
And when we take it out of the context of those functional things, we start losing those, right? And then we get in this area right now where I think we are, which is inside his position is so important. It will facilitate all these other things. So let's isolate it, and we're going to run it every day over and over and over and over. And when you get really, really good at getting that, then you'll be able to start getting all the things that it facilitates. But that doesn't really work when we do it in isolation. And so I think, one, that's not to say that it's always a bad idea. When is it an exploration and a deepening of something that's new or hasn't really been challenged before? I think that's where it's useful. Then when we're just doing it over and over, that's an area we've worked on a lot, and we've just stripped out other critical information, and no learning is happening with those other things. Potentially no learning is happening of anything functional in jiu-jitsu, anything inherently, deeply, intrinsically functional, scoring points, a submission, then we're getting pretty unproductive. And so the way I like to think about creating tasks is not about isolating skills, not about isolating things like, okay, get inside position, get past the knee shield, blah, 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 blah. But think about it as problems. If you think about problems that come up, when you approach it like that, the task, here's a problem that comes up. When you're on someone's back. Often they'll get a 2-on-1 on that choking arm. If they get a 2-on-1 on that choking arm, it's going to be really tough to stay on their back, right? They're going to be able to use that pretty well to escape. So how do you solve that problem? How do you turn that into still getting back to a controlling position and submitting them? That's a problem to solve. And when we do it that way, we say, here, we put you in the problem. We design it exactly however we want. But we say, I need you to get to a functional solution to that problem. Now you get to do any solution to that problem that you want. You have all the options are available. And the problem, we have to make sure the problem is critical and relevant to jiu-jitsu, right? I don't want you like doing how many pirouettes can you do in a wrestling task. It's not relevant. Like at least if that might make you a better mover, but not a better grappler. Probably. Like I don't imagine that'll make you a better grappler at all in any relevant way.
Probably not a lot of donor skills there. So in a situation like, because we talk about inside position, I think a good example is, okay, you're in half guard. Someone gets a underhook on you. Like you can like free your knee so you can make some space.
You're on top? Or?
Yeah, you're on top, right? Mm-hmm. And then you can like backstep and you can enter into leg locks. You can enter into passing positions. But then it's like, okay, this can be advantageous, but a lot of times this isn't advantageous when someone gets an underhook on you. But like for me, like I actually like letting people get underhooks on me so I can like deal with the problem, you know, like, and just kind of, I don't know, I'm a weird guy where like, I like to, I don't know how to phrase this without sounding like cocky, but like, I like to like win anyways. Like I like to get the job done anyways. You got an underhook? Well, no problem. So I'll put myself there so I can like, you know, get the job done. And I didn't have to worry about this because I'm good to go, you know? Yeah, that didn't sound too bad when I said it out loud. I thought it was going to sound really cocky, but yeah, I like kind of like, yeah, challenging myself and yeah, putting myself in not these bad positions, even though I do that sometimes, but some traditionally bad positions. So like in a game, how do you go about that? Like, again, it can be a bad thing or it can be, you can use that against them too. So like, do you like try to get them not to, as the top player, not let the bottom player get underhooks on you, or just like, that's fine. And the function is keeping them down.
Well, yeah, that's where it gets really interesting. And that's why it can be so dangerous to have this really isolated approach, especially the more you use it. So, and it's about a reconception of what skill is and what athletes are doing, right? And something functional like jiu-jitsu, skilled athletes are problem solvers. They can solve any problem. If someone got an underhook on you, if someone with no experience, no skill, got an underhook on you, and you didn't throw them, I'd say, oh, like, come on, dude. Like, no, of course he can, right? And that happens at a high level too.
Yeah.
Right? That's what skill is. It's finding a way to do it anyway.
Exactly.
And we have to design tasks. If we want to do it the most powerful way, we've got to give people the availability to solve problems in any way that's functional, right? If they score points in jiu-jitsu, that's a good thing.
Exactly.
That's a good thing. It doesn't matter how you do it. As long as you don't get submitted right after you've scored, that's helpful. But anything more micro, anything that it doesn't get you like a direct, objective, functional thing, points or submission, you're going to have to use that to get something else before it really becomes useful. And your opponent is going to be really skilled at preventing that. So like one of the things that I see often, like underhook is a great example. So you can make a good argument, and I believe this, that an underhook is better than an overhook from most positions, maybe all of them. But what you see over and over is people get an underhook and then they get thrown. They get thrown from an overhook. They get a body lock and then they still get thrown, right? Because the opponent is really skilled at getting the job done anyway. Yeah. And right now in the ecological jiu-jitsu community, because we're really isolating these tasks and these skills, we're not giving athletes the room to solve these problems creatively in training. And then in a lot of those ways, in those transitions, in those like bad positions, micro bad positions, they're worse problem solvers than the people that are still doing the traditional approach. They drill, use all the techniques, and then they spar. And when they spar, they can do any solution. they get good at those transitions. They get really good at those transitions. They get really good at like, oh yeah, like not only did this guy get an underhook and now I've got to throw him, but actually I baited him to get an underhook. And I'm definitely going to throw him because I'm good from an overhook.
Exactly. Oh yeah, that makes total sense. And like on the like, I guess in that situation, yeah, what would be happening is people don't get exposure to these problems if like the game just stops if they got an underhook, right? Because you don't have an
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly.
but then it's like, how do you go about fixing this? Because you could do multiple different things. You could be like, okay, we'll open up the game more. You could do that. You could also start a game where they have an underhook, and the goal is to deal with that. You could do, yeah, where you keep going even if they get an underhook. There's so many ways to like kind of put it together. And yeah, I guess the worst thing you could do is like overconstrain it. Because I think if it's overconstrained, I'd rather just be doing static drilling, and I hate static drilling. You know, some people like myself, like I just want to grapple. I don't want to do CLA, which might sound like, you know, strange, but like I don't want to do static drilling. I don't want to do CLA. I just want to grapple. And I feel like my skills are at a level where like there isn't a whole lot of CLA I could do to get specifically better at one area. I think that my time is better spent just rolling. And I don't mean that in a cocky way, but I mean, I am confident in my skills. So like that's where that comes from. But like, yeah, like I just want to roll. So like a guy like me, what do you do in that situation?
I mean, that's a boredom problem, right? And I think that probably should come from the way the tasks are designed. And I would bet that if you were playing some more open tasks, some tasks that really give you some more creativity to solve the problems the way you want to solve them, that you would say, oh, yeah, like you, there's, you might get a little bit better bumps in performance if you measure it just in sparring from doing sparring for a short term sort of thing, like a pre-competition phase, essentially. But generally, you've got to be getting more skill development by using the CLA. Like the whole point is to design it in whatever way is the most useful. And so, you know, you're a black belt, you've been doing this for a long time, you've been competing a lot. A lot of that level isn't about establishing new attractors, but rather refining the ones you have. Sparring is very useful for that, like doing open rounds. However, there's got to be times where doing more constrained tasks will be very helpful, and there's ways to do it. And I think what you're getting at though is not like I don't think it is like I don't like using the CLA. I think what you're saying is I don't like using the CLA in kind of the current way that you've been exposed to it. And I think if you try it using a lot more open games, I think it will be a lot more engaging for you. And this is like a little bit, maybe a little bit of a hot take, maybe not, but I think that a lot of why people are so bored when they drill, or they inherently don't feel like it's that fun, is because they stripped so much of the information out of it. I think there's a correlation there between boredom and how engaging a task is, and how much information is there, and how dynamic the task is, and how many opportunities, how much opening we give on this like affordance landscape of people to use. And so you might feel like, you know, if we did like a side control task and it's like, you know, I don't know, like the only thing you can do is like try to like pry up your partner's near elbow, right? Try to get your hip to like open up that area. That's the only thing you can do. Like you might be like, fuck. Like,
Yeah, I don't want to do that.
I do not want to do this. Yeah. Like I can't do anything that I want to do. And like, I'm already good at that. Right.
Yeah.
Versus if like, I bet I could design some tasks for you that'd be like, oh, that was fucking fun. You know,
it's possible.
And I don't think that's hard.
But do you think you could do it in a way where it's still more fun than just doing the full game of jiu-jitsu?
I think so. I'm not sure. I mean, I haven't like rolled with you, but I mean, and that's a personal preference.
Yeah.
But like, but it should be fun. I think that's the core of the thing. It should be fun.
Yeah.
If it isn't fun, I think you're doing. I think you're not doing it right if it's not fun.
Exactly.
You know, I think we agree on that.
No, 100%. I think that the most three important things are safety, and then fun, and then skill acquisition.
Yeah.
And in that order.
Yeah.
Right. And some people might have a different order, but like that's definitely my order. And for me, like I think that what I prefer for my own skill acquisition is just like learning new things specifically, and then just trying them when I'm grappling. Like,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, it's hard to say what do I like? Like, what is it? What I like, or is it what actually serves me best? That's the hard part, right?
Sure. But that's still using constraints.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
say like, all right, today I'm doing open rounds, but I have to hit arm bars.
Yeah,
That's a constraint. That's a task.
but I agree because I do that. But then, like, I want to learn like a specific leg lock, and I want to try that. But I do want to try it first, usually, just without resistance, which makes the case again for why I still feel that it doesn't need to be completely dismissed of like some less representative tasks of like, yeah, being no resistance, because I personally,
Yeah.
like enjoy that. I want to learn something new, do it a couple times, let's try it out, let's good to go. But yeah, again, it's just like you don't need to make a whole class revolve around that.
Yeah.
But like my perfect class, like what I would like, I show up, someone teaches me like 2-3 things within 10 minutes max, no more than 10 minutes. And then we just roll for an hour and a half. Like,
Wow.
yeah, that's what I want.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, it's just a tough one, because would CLA specific tasks be better for me than that? And if that's true, then is that something to keep in mind for your own athletes as like a coach listening, or just in general in coaching, like, for more skilled performers, like what do they want and what do they enjoy? Because again, it mostly comes down to like, I don't want to waste my energy doing more constrained things. I want to give my full energy to just like doing jiu-jitsu like as a full complete game. Yeah, but is that what I want, or is it actually more efficient? That's the tough part.
I mean, if to the extent that that's really what you want, then like that's what you got to have. Like that's cool, and like there's nothing to like like you got to do what you like and enjoy, right?
Yeah.
But as far as skill development, it should be much better to use some tasks at least a decent amount of the time, because like there are still areas where, as someone that's been grappling for a long time, you've got attractors.
Yeah.
Most of those are very productive. Some of them are not. And so for someone really skilled to come in and say, all right, Jordan, like, I watch you, especially like if you have like competition footage, like, okay, like the easiest thing is like you have a bunch of competition footage and it's like, okay, here's the last 5 matches you lost. This happened in that one, that happened in that one, that happened in that one, that happened in that one. Here's kind of like here's the problem that led to those losses. And now here's the attractor, the kind of skilled habit that led to that, or multiple. And now we're going to create some tasks to incentivize a shift away from that, a shift towards, and it doesn't have to necessarily be a shift towards another specific thing. It's not, oh, I stepped in the wrong place when I was passing, and then now we need to force you to step in the right place. You need to step over here. No, think about it in terms of problems. What problem was presented? What problem was someone able to beat you with?
Yeah.
And then when you present someone with that problem, the system is going to refine it really well. That's going to be far more productive than just doing open rounds, because like generally in those open rounds, you're probably, especially like just in the gym regularly, you're probably not exposed to people that can really make that a challenging problem for you.
Yeah.
Right. And then even if you are, it's going to happen pretty rarely. And that's where like the practice density comes in. That we can use a task, we can expose you to something, in 5, we can expose you like purely to that problem for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, where in a 2-hour session where you're doing all open rounds, you may not get exposed to it at all. You may get exposed to it once, for 10 seconds. That's it.
I 100% agree. I think that's like the best thing about CLA, and like what really got me like, oh, okay, yeah, CLA, that's like That's the thing, because you get so many touches in one
Yeah.
area where you wouldn't otherwise. So like definitely I 100% agree with that. Yeah, I think it is probably more like what I want rather than, but I think that, I don't know.
Fine.
I think it could also go like negatively too, of like, say like, okay, you pick up some like competition like mistakes, but like maybe they were just like these like tiny kind of like, you zigged when you should have zagged, and maybe they are you overanalyze that mistake and try to take you away from like that attractor or something, because like, it didn't work for you, but in reality it wasn't that big of a deal and you're kind of over analyzing it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but there's a way to do it, right? Like the way is not like it's generally not going to be productive. Be like again, like you did this pattern, you need to do that pattern.
Yeah.
But think of it more like you want to think about it more broadly. There's a Nassim Taleb kind of ism of we'd rather be generally correct than specifically wrong,
Yeah. Okay.
right?
Yeah. That's
It's
good.
the same thing with like constraining the test. Generally correct. The less you constrain it, the downsides are not that bad. When you over constrain, the risks and downsides are enormous when you constrain too much. So if we say, okay, like for instance, let's say you just got leg locked. You're just having a hard time with entanglements. When you like, let's say your game is like takedown heavy, passing heavy, excellent. But when you do get caught in entanglements, that you get leg locked. But or when you lose, it's from getting leg locked in entanglements. And that doesn't often happen, but when it does, when you lose, that's how it happened.
Yeah.
We don't have to say you did it wrong, you need to do it like this. We can just now expose you to a ton of entanglements and you're going to get better. As specific to that problem that came up as what happened, right? Like here's a specific position that it happened from. There's a specific, I probably wouldn't even be specific to this type of submission generally. Be like, this is the sort of area, this is the sort of situation. Now someone's going to put you in that problem and you've got to solve it against all these different people. And maybe we make you do it when you're tired. Maybe you make it, after strength training, before. Maybe we have a bunch of people watching and we try to like bring some representativeness of like the audience and the stress and all that, right? But if we pose it as a problem and then we let you get good at solving it, now the next time you come back to the competition, you don't have to think about, oh, like, oh, when I get in an entanglement, I've got to remember to do this. And you're fixated on the move you have to do, not the task, but focus on task goal goes down. Now you can go in the competition and be like, yeah, fucking entangle me.
Exactly.
Like fucking try it.
And I think that's also a good example of something people can do on their own if they don't go to like a CLA school, especially when it comes to defense. You can be like, when you're rolling, continually putting yourself in like entanglements and just dealing with it and getting all those touches. Again, when it's defense, it's like way easier because you can just like let the person have you in a bad spot, where if it's offense, it might be harder to get those like touches because it might be harder to get the position in the first place. So just going back to the discussion about models, I think that one other good reason it can be good to have these kind of mental representations, or even just like a name for. I know. Not like
The eco people.
yeah, I know, not like that.
Keyboard warriors are getting ready.
Exactly, guys. That's not what I mean. Okay, not IP, but no, like I mean, like because I'll be like wrestling or something, and like I'm thinking like I'm gonna try like an over tie throw by. Like that's what I'm going to try. And because like maybe in these like situations, sometimes you can't just be completely fluid of like, I want to get behind the elbows or whatever, but I'm not thinking about that. I'm just like going for it. Like, and I have a specific like idea what I want to go for. And like I know the name of it, I know how it works, I know how I would teach it. And that is helpful, I find, where like when it's sorry, I shouldn't say, when it's like CLA and like you're not really using names for things, you're letting them discover things without telling them specifically what it is. Yeah, I know. I just feel like it can be helpful to know specifically what something is so you can specifically go for it. And there is like mental, things happening. Like at times you need to be a bit more cognitive, I guess. Like you can't be completely flowy.
I think I disagree mostly.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly. Like it comes back to this focus on task goal, right? generally, anytime we're thinking about what thing you're going to do, if you're within the task, that's focus, that's mental energy that you're not spending on the actual task.
I agree.
What you actually need is to like succeed, get a takedown, or get a submission, and focus on a specific way to do that is not an actual focus on what your partner is doing and what the environment is affording for you, right?
Yeah.
That's generally what the research looks like. I think there's little bits, like even if you feel into just like kind of flow state stuff, right? Flow state is generally associated with like optimal performance and optimal learning, and like you could kind of just see it as a state of being really attuned, right? Of not thinking about what you're doing and not thinking about what you're gonna do, and yet doing it much better.
Yeah.
I think if you feel into that, just at like a anecdotal level, if you feel into like some times when you've experienced that, there are still like little tidbits of thoughts occasionally.
Yeah.
Of like kind of more tactical things, I think.
Exactly.
Of like, especially between, if it's something with rounds, it might be good to strategize a little bit between rounds, right? You have the time. But when you're engaged in it and it's like dynamic, I think spending that cognitive energy on a more cognitive idea and like constraining your movements towards that one specific thing, I think is generally going to be a little counterproductive.
I 100% agree. No, I agree. Like, because like even like the Enso symbol, like I think you have it on you too, right? It's like to free the mind and let the body create. That's like flow state. I love that. We actually have it on our gis where it says free your mind, because I couldn't fit the whole quote of and let the body create, but I really like that, and I 100% agree. Like that's where you want to be. Like you don't want to be spending mental energy thinking about stuff. You want to be flowing and doing what you need to do, but at the same time, I don't think that's always possible. And a good example would actually be, I think, like you shoot on a shot, like you shoot for a double leg, they put you in the front headlock. And like sometimes I'm thinking like, am I going to be able to do like a sit through from here? Like I'm going to try to find my opportunity, or am I going to try to fight the hands? And I think like, I'm just going to go for it. Right. But like, there's like these thoughts happening, and I know specifically what that is. So that's what I'm going to go for. So like, yeah, like again, I don't think it's ideal to like get stuck in these positions where you need to think of what to do next, but like they can kind of happen either way. Where like, I think in a situation like that, if I wasn't shown specifically a sit through, yeah, I might be kind of like lost of like, I know what my task at hand is, uncover my head, but like, I'm not able to do it. Like they have too tight of a grip on my neck. I can't fight this. Like, what else can I do? So I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah. There's something that comes to mind from a totally different realm of dance. And so one of my mentors in kind of the movement sphere, Tom Wexler, he said something really interesting. He's an amazing mover, dancer, I think choreographer now. I think he's doing a lot of stuff, and he moves beautifully. He does like amazing stuff, all sorts of acrobatics, and just integrated beautifully. But he said something once. He said, "You're never gonna flow into a backflip."
Yeah, that's a good point.
And that was very striking for me, because to me, when he flips, it looks like he's just flowing into it.
Mhm.
But in certain contexts, maybe certain sorts of things, maybe things that you have to commit to more,
Yeah.
like again, in those certain contexts, maybe there has to be a little bit of like more cognitive energy to like direct, I'm gonna flip now. I'm gonna make that commitment and go for it.
Exactly.
But I do think generally, like, again, in something as dynamic as jiu-jitsu, it's like the more focus we can possibly have. Yes, it's not realistic to not be thinking all the time. It's not realistic to not be thinking. But the closer we can get to that, where you're not thinking about what you're going to do and you're just focused on doing it, I think we get more out of it. It's like, yeah, the thoughts come up, but like like try to just stay as focused as possible. And the more you go in that direction, I think the better results we get, better performance and learning.
For sure. And while we're on that kind of topic of like sit throughs, like I think that is like a pretty essential thing for someone to know to be able to counter the front headlock and uncover their head. Like I want someone to specifically know how to do that, right? And then if you go like the CLA route of like, you know, whatever way you can uncover your head, like that's fine, you know, and you will have a lot of skills emerge from that. But like, will the sit through emerge? And if it doesn't, it doesn't matter because you're still achieving your objective. But do I want you to know how to do that specifically? That's also yes. So like, how do you blend those kind of thoughts?
Okay. So, this is perfect because I don't do sit throughs ever. So what I would say, so two things. One, if our definition of skill that we agree on is that we can do all these moves against resistance, then okay, you got to learn to sit through because that's part of the definition. If the definition is you have to win, is like you just have to win against people that are good in various situations, then what I would say is, can you design a task, like a functional task, like not over constraining it to force this thing, but like design a problem where to solve that problem, I'm probably going to have to sit through. I'm probably going to have to figure out a way to do that. And I would say if you cannot do that, then the sit through isn't really that functional, or at least not to me, at least not in the tasks with the partners that we set up, right? But maybe it is. And so then the question becomes like, all right, what tasks do we do to force that to have to emerge? Like what problems do we create that what problems does a sit through solve?
Yeah, I mean, it would be uncovering the head, right? So like, but
I do that differently.
Yeah,
I get on the hands and scoop my way out. Yeah, and that's pretty safe. And then it's interesting because I'm like a movement teacher, but
let's just say like they got such a strong grip, and you can't fight the hands. Like a sit through is really a way of like fighting the hands without actually addressing the hands. Like you kind of force them to post their hand on the mat by doing that, and I guess the problem would be it is 100% of like, do you make a game that like is trying to get this specifically to emerge, and then it's so over constrained where you can't use your effective movement solution. But then if you keep it so open, people might not explore that solution either. I mean, a solution could
now we're talking
exactly right.
Now we're talking about
and then you could demonstrate. You could like maybe you do this, you show it right, but like I mean.
So I'll say I've never yet gone against someone with such a strong front headlock that I couldn't, if I get my hands on their hands, that like I couldn't get out or make something happen.
We're going to roll soon.
I got
a good front headlock.
I can't get out of that. If I can get the thumb in, essentially. The thumb isn't in, it's like, oh, that's going to be tough if someone's good. But then so that's a cool thing though. If that you bring up a functional point, like sometimes you're gonna, if I'm gonna do that, that's committing the hands to defending there, right?
Yeah.
It'd be nice to not have to do that.
Yeah.
I don't have any options right now that don't involve using my hands really. So maybe we make it, maybe we constrain it a little too much. Again, this is exploring a new area of my solution space. I have not explored this. I have not tried to do this against resistance. So maybe, if I'm just theorizing with you here, maybe we design the task. Okay, you can't use your hands on their hands. You still have to get out of the front headlock. And we see, okay, does the sit through emerge? Like basically, again, not you have to do a sit through. You have to get out of the front headlock and get to something better without using your hands on their hands. You have to solve that problem a different way. Explore the solution space of how you can do it. Sit through would probably emerge. I would bet it would emerge like that.
Yeah, I think so too. But and again, the question there is that more productive to do a very constrained game, or just give them an informational constraint of like, this is how you do a sit through, and then play a more open game,
right?
And then if it emerges, it emerges. If it doesn't, it doesn't.
Right.
That's where it gets tough, right?
And then that's where like it's always great to err on the side of under constraining.
Yeah.
Because if you can just say, here's a way to do it, here's what it looks like. Now do anything productive, anything that solves this problem, anything that gets you something good. That's great. Now all the options are open, all the learning can happen. But sometimes we need to constrain that more. If you give me that task and we weren't talking about sit-throughs, I'm not going to try a sit-through. And now I'm going to think about it more, right? It's different. But then, so yeah, sometimes, again, we can constrain more with a specific problem in mind, a specific reason of why we want to add another constraint, because we're trying to shift, in this case, me away from an attractor I already have to explore a new area, right? And then the thing would be, so we do the more constrained tasks. You can't use your hands on their hands. Try to get out, get to something good, do something productive. Okay, say the sit-through emerges. Okay, now we bring it back into a more open task. Does the sit-through still emerge? Is it still, have we created something where that is now the most optimal solution to a problem when you have all the different means to solve the problem available? It might be. It might be, it might not, right? And then that's where we might say, maybe we play that game again, because like I really think that'd be good for you. Or maybe we say, maybe wasn't so productive for you in those situations. So maybe we just spend our time elsewhere. That's the art of coaching, right?
And it can be constrained in the way of you can't touch the hands with your hands, but it could also be constrained in the way of you can't resist, right?
Could be.
Or
like the opponent can't resist,
like
and then
that.
I've just got it. Yeah. And then
you know what I mean?
Exactly, because then I can explore that solution space. If it's like explore, here's what a sit through looks like. Explore different ways you can do that without resistance. Cool. Yeah, I've never done that. Yeah. Right? Like not in that way.
Exactly.
So I'm going to explore some new stuff. That could be quite productive.
But doesn't that get you just hyped up of like, yeah, unresisted stuff can be useful?
I mean, the question was never like, it can't. Yeah. The question was never like 0. The question is like, are we at like 0.1, or like 0.05, and like, but again, like that's an area where that could be really productive for me, right?
Yeah, exactly.
More productive than just doing another front headlock task.
That's exactly what I think. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And that's what we were talking about. Like there are times you just like, you need a strong reason. And probably I would bet that more resisted task of like, don't use your hands on their hands or whatever other version of that we want to come up with the resistance would be more productive. But then, that could be a scenario. Again, I haven't explored that solution space at all.
Do you think there's a way? Well, of course there's a way, but do you think it'd be relatively easy, and should we like test that? Like,
yeah,
right? Because why hasn't that been done? Because when it comes to jiu-jitsu, I think some specific jiu-jitsu eco kind of research would be great, because when people reference the literature, it isn't on jiu-jitsu. And I know, like, what makes jiu-jitsu so special, that kind of stuff, it's all the same of like movement patterns. I think that's true, but it's also how you apply the science to your practice. And jiu-jitsu is a different type of practice than different sports.
Yeah.
Right. So I think it would be really good. I think the sit out could actually be a really good example of like one which you can test pretty easy, of like have a group like, do a game where you can't touch the hands. Another group, you show them, they do it without resistance a little bit, then you play a more open game. But then the problem is too, is like the practice, it's just one practice, right? You have to do it over time and see like, where it goes.
If you want to do a good study, you want like 8 to 12 weeks. Like that's the standard. But like this sort of stuff, because you've been doing this, we see changes within minutes, sometimes seconds.
Yeah.
Right? That's an interesting. I don't think you need weeks for that. You just do one session, and I think you'd see some interesting. And again, like this is the thing. Like, you don't have to publish a randomized controlled trial, right? You don't have to get it accepted into some journal. Yeah. All you need is like some decent evidence that, like, we tested this. We didn't just theorize that this would be better. We tested it, and we had like ideally a little bit of quantitative data. Here's how many people did the sit out in these different groups, and here's how successful they were in these different groups before and after.
Yeah. I mean, I should actually do that, because like I like testing things out
Yeah.
for my YouTube channel and everything. So like, I think that would actually be
That's a
really good
great
thing to test
idea.
out. Yeah. Yeah. No, we should do that for sure. Like I just did a video like it just came out today. It was like rolling a street clothes, and you'd be surprised. Street clothes are way more similar to gi than no gi. No gi is not the right thing for self defense because like a t-shirt doesn't rip as easy as people think it does.
Really?
And it's so good to use for choking people because it's like it stretches like exactly where you want it. It almost like forms around their body, and it's most people wouldn't think, but yeah, gi is way more representative of regular clothes than no gi is.
Interesting.
So I did that experiment. You know,
Yeah, I love it.
I'll do the eco experiment next.
I remember another one that you did that I liked was the you don't have to close both carotid arteries to get the choke.
Yeah. Like, what do you think about that one?
That was cool.
Because you're, kinesiology
Yeah.
background. What do you think about that?
Oh, I thought it was very interesting. I haven't run any of those. Like, I haven't run any studies like that. I haven't seen any studies like that, but it's just.
Well, the reason why I did it was because people were telling me that it's not true, that I was wrong, that you can't choke someone with only one carotid artery blocked. So I'm like, I'll take one for the team,
Yeah.
because I believe this with all my heart. And then people still after they're like, no, you had like carotid stenosis or whatever. I'm pretty sure I'm fine. Like I'm healthy. I'm okay. They had like excuses for why it was a bullshit experiment. And, I felt kind of like cheated by that in a sense because like, well, you do the experiment, if you're going to tell me I'm wrong, just do the experiment, but nobody did. And like, I went to sleep twice that day because the first time we recorded it, you couldn't see perfectly that the other side wasn't blocked. So I went to sleep 2 times in a row, and like I took one for the team big time. And so I was a little frustrated, because if you're going to try to prove me wrong, just like do it,
Not to get us on a different topic, because I want to talk about that more, but like that's a thing. I got a lot of pushback with the ecological stuff, and like some people were pushing back. Oh, that's like not enough evidence, or no studies on jiu-jitsu. And we need like randomized controlled trials. We need meta reviews. Here's this hierarchy of evidence. And I'm just like, hold on. Like if we were doing a drug study, if we're trying to get a new drug through clinical trials and we're going to mass produce it and we're going to give it to 3 million people each year, we want to be really clear what the side effects are, right? Like there's a huge risk reward equation there that we want to be really sure about. We need a lot of evidence for that. When we're talking about jiu-jitsu and we're talking about motor learning, our default assumptions don't have a lot of evidence behind them. So for me, something with even a few studies, that's a hell of a lot better than nothing.
Yeah.
So you can't say, with a few studies, with 5 studies, with 20 studies, you can't say something, this is ironclad truth, for the rest of time, right? This is a law. This is a physical law, not a theory anymore. But it's like, well, that's evidence to point us in this direction, right? In this case, that's evidence to point us that people are outperforming, they're learning better with the CLA. Where's the evidence that people are outperforming with the traditional approach? There's pretty much none.
I agree, except, again, the world champions are, traditional, but you don't know if that's why.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
but that's the thing.
So I know your argument already.
That's
and I agree with you.
anecdotal, right? That's so much lower on our hierarchy of evidence. Like there's no control of any of the variables there.
Yeah. No,
right?
like I agree with you 100%, but I also think that it also shows that it's, which I'm sure you agree with, that it isn't completely crap either. It's just not as good.
Yes. Yes.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's what again, people have a hard time with. It's not that the traditional is completely worthless. It's just that CLA just, tends to be better, scientifically proven to be better. And the experiences I've had with it anecdotally, it looks better to me. Like people are getting better way faster.
Yeah.
But again, just to kind of go off of that last topic we were talking about with sit through. So again, you can constrain it where you can't touch the hands. You could constrain it where your opponent can't resist. Like those are 2 options, right? And then what it comes down to, and that's specifically if you want them to know a sit through, but then it comes down to like, what do they want? Right.
Mhm.
Because
Mhm.
I feel like someone would just to be like, just show me the goddamn thing. Just like, instead of having me have all these like constraints, I can't do this, can't do that, just fucking show me and then let me do it in a live situation. But I don't know if everyone wants that. And that's what I'd want. But I don't know if everyone wants that. And I think that's at least something to consider of like, what do they want? Right?
Yeah.
Which we
That's
mentioned before,
that's
right?
important. It's important, and like again, you gotta keep them motivated and happy and like having fun. That's so critically important.
Yeah.
But then like, sometimes if you don't show anything, then like who knows what crazy shit people will come up with. Like that happens all the time too, right? Where you're
Yeah.
like, you put together the task, here's a problem, and people just do some wild shit that like sometimes is amazing.
That's very true. Let me ask you a question of like, I know you don't do a lot of gi anymore, but one submission that I want my kids, my youth to know, and I have a really hard time getting them to do it, is a bow and arrow choke.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I've seen other people's games for it, and I think they're not bad, but I've tried them and I've tried just showing them. And I have a really hard time getting them to just start going for bow and arrow chokes. Like, how would you approach that? eh, Specifically wanting them to do that choke, because it's a good choke in the gi. I think everyone should know it.
I mean, my default would be like start them there, tell them to
Yeah,
finish
yeah.
it. Like, what are the games people are using? I'm not even familiar with.
So it might be like, start with the lapel grip and then basically finish. Like, find something to grab that where you can kind of lean them into your wrist, like push them into your wrist. And because it's true, you can grab the pants, you could like grab other places, grab their other lapel. But like, when I've done that, I felt like the youth, which is 9 to 15, I felt like they just seemed kind of lost and they needed some like guidance to uh, help them search a little easier, right? Because there's so much information. It's just, I felt like for that, I got to just show them. But even like doing it without resistance, they had a hard time with that too. And like, yeah.
Are you talking about running the task without showing them what a bow and arrow choke looks like at all? And then,
No, like I would show it. I would show like, you can do this, you could do this, but
Mhm.
start with the lapel grip and then yeah, try to finish them basically. But yeah, I just can't get them. I just can't get them doing it. I can get them doing other submissions, like where like we'll do it and like, man, they're killing it right now. They're going for it. Like I have a game that's arm bars from the back, and like after doing that game, I see a lot more arm bars from the back and other places because they're just learning to really move their hips better and get the imposition better. But like just the bow and arrow choke, I don't know. I don't know like what I can do to like get them to do it. Yeah.
Mm,
And I ask a lot of eco people this, and yeah, no, I've never really gotten an answer I like that much.
yeah, it'd be interesting. So, like, it'd be great to see like what people are doing. And then again, if they're just strangling people left and right and getting so much better at it, then maybe we say, yeah, like we don't need to change anything.
Yeah,
But man, bow and arrow is a really common submission
yeah,
at the highest level. So it'd be a little hard to believe that that's not a useful thing to be able to do and to be doing fairly often.
exactly.
So where we're seeing that, right? So you could think of that as like there's no attractor there. They're not gravitating towards that sort of solution. So how do you exaggerate that information? Ideally, we're not constraining out so much and removing all the information. We're just exaggerating the affordance. So how can we exaggerate the affordance and still leave things fairly open? Put them there. Give them the cross grip. Give them a grip on the pants or something. And like put them in something really good where like they're gonna get that tap most of the time, where it's like almost like if you didn't get it, you screwed up. And once they hit that a number of times, it should start to feel pretty good to them,
Mm-hmm.
And then the harder question is now the potentially harder question is how do you now have a more open game? How do you now get it more integrated into an open game? And then how I would think about it is what problems are they running into on the way there that they're not able to solve? And then how can we maybe tinker with the constraints to maybe remove a few of those problems or just enough of those problems? That's how I would think about it.
That makes sense. Already, as you're describing it, I'm already kind of thinking of like maybe you start them in it, but like you don't have the pants or something. Like you're like,
Yeah,
like you're
but
not
they're
getting-
already at the angle.
yeah, exactly. Because I think that's where it kind of goes wrong is like they don't have the angle yet and they don't have like the leg over the shoulder and like kind of, really controlling their head and shoulder. And like that's where they have the problem like getting to. Because a lot of times, like if you do it from your overside, then like your bottom leg is going to be stuck and you need to chair sit or you need to bring them to the other side to get your leg unstuck. And that's really where they have a problem with. They're like, how do I bring my leg up higher if my leg is stuck on the ground from their body weight? But yeah, if you just start them there, but then I think without the pants, because if you have the pants, then it's just like, they're just the person getting choked just screwed at that point. Because
which is not necessarily a problem
that's
in
true
this
too.
scenario, right? That may be what we want is like, make sure they get it.
But then the entry into it is kind of like static in a way. Because
but it becomes, it is. But then that's where I love like Cal Jones' concept of easy in.
yeah.
Start from the back. You let your partner start getting to that angle. You let them get the pants, and then as soon as they get it, now you go.
Exactly.
And now you're not just like, there's a little bit of information there on the way in. And what happens is like the position you get into is a little different. There's some momentum. There's some like different things going on. It makes it so much more representative than you would think.
Yeah. I think it makes it more representative often using, I call it a dynamic start, but I also like that word for it or name for it of easy in, hard out. Is that what it was?
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense too. But yeah, I find dynamic starts can be very helpful because like it isn't representative a lot of times just to start a game like, completely
in a bow and arrow statically.
Yeah, exactly.
You have to get to that.
Exactly, which is going to feel different and it's going to like, look a little bit different than rather just like completely being in there. So it depends what it is too. And, I find like I like dynamic starts too because you can kind of like cheat a little bit of like, this is a move to like get you there. And then like once you get there, now do the game, right? So actually a good example is using like a rolling back attack from 3/4 mounts to get into the truck, and then you can play like a truck style game. Because this is something I've asked a lot of people too of like, how do you teach a rolling back attack? And then they'd say, well, like basically like just have them in 3/4 mount and try to get to the back basically. But like the problem with that is like
they're not going to do it.
Yeah, it's just not going to happen because if the person knows what you're trying to do when it comes to that, you're not going to be able to do it. Just not going to happen. But if you make it super open, I think that they might not even try to do that. They might just try to go to mount like normal.
Yeah.
And you could say, well, like, do they really need the rolling back attack? Well, I like the rolling back attack. I think, okay, not to go on a rant, but I think that the rolling back attack can really contribute to like good scrambling ability. Like if you can do a good rolling back attack and time it well, be good at that, then you can scramble into these back takes. So I think it's a really important thing. I don't think it's like a niche thing. I think it's a good thing to know. But so it's like kind of combining it. Like, here's a rolling back attack, but just use it to get into the position. And so I kind of got what I wanted. They learned what a rolling back attack was. It wasn't to build a motor program. It was just to get into the position to start the game.
Yeah. And even like, and in that case, we're maybe not even thinking about it as like a move, but rather as like a situation, of like you're rolling, there's momentum, there's inertia, there's a change in orientation.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different things that like maybe you wouldn't naturally gravitate towards if you haven't explored that already.
Exactly.
And again, like, a great time to like add some constraints. As a default, when are we using constraints to explore? When we're using constraints to explore, that's when we're using them right.
Yeah.
When are we just using constraints to restrict and force? You have to do a certain thing, and that's the way you always practice. That's the thing we always work on. But when are we saying, you haven't tried this before, so I want you to not do the things you usually do just right now. try exploring this thing because I think it's going to teach you some useful skills and get you good in some situations and some scrambles that you wouldn't be so exposed to otherwise. That's a great reasoning to use.
Exactly. And, I think that, yeah, the scramble thing alone, because I think these are kind of like transferable skills often of like, it might be from like 3/4 mount, you go for this, but like it's going to help you with your scrambles a lot, I think at least. But I guess it comes down to the coach and what they think is best for the person, because you also don't want to be like, don't do what you normally do. I mean, sometimes you can be and explore this new space, but then also sometimes you don't want to like break what's not, or fix what's not broken either, right?
Yeah.
So it really comes down to like what your own judgment call, I guess, as a coach. Because I'm reading like Rob Gray's book of like, he was talking about a judo guy, and this judo guy just like did the same move over and over and over again, but he was super successful with it. It was like Olympian. I think he medaled there and everything. And so like, what do you do with him? Like, do you get him to do something else?
Right.
Or do you just keep doing what you're doing?
Yeah. So that's where, again, like thinking about it as problems. So if we get that judo guy, he's got the one move. Can I come up with a problem that he can't solve with that move? And again, like move, right? If I can't do that, no problems.
Yeah.
He's not going to have any problems. If he's an Olympic champion, he probably has a way to solve all of those problems and still funnel it into that specific area where he's going to win.
Exactly. Yeah, that makes sense. And then I guess another question I had is, I guess when it comes down to like what people like too, I know we talk about this a lot, but like it also, I don't think time is as valuable as other people do. I don't mean this in like a weird way, but like I think like 5 minutes and just give the person what they like. 5 minutes isn't so like sacred and valuable that it has to be live for those 5 minutes. But like, what do you think?
Yeah, there's no like sacred cow. Like it has to always be full resistance every single minute, every single second, no matter what your motivation is, no matter who you're working with, right? Like, again, like I was to say that, like Jiu-Jitsu, in Jiu-Jitsu, it sounds somewhat reasonable to say that. But when you start thinking about other sports, imagine saying that for like dance. Like, when do we have resistance from another person? Like, we're always practicing without that.
Exactly.
And maybe we can add it sometimes. Like, actually, I love exploring some dance and movement tasks where it's like, you push the other person and then they've got to respond in interesting ways. Like that makes a lot of interesting, really awesome stuff emerge. Because
it is a pretty cooperative thing when you dance with someone, right? So like that would add a lot of noise to the signal. If like you're not helping, you're like you're not cooperating with them, right? And you're kind of like throwing them off their game. I would think that would make them more skillful of like, I gotta stay like doing a good job here, while they're fucking with me.
Yeah, I love doing that sometimes,
Yeah.
But like you can't, like, you're not gonna ever consider doing that all the time.
Yeah.
Right. And like kind of the opposite in Jiu-Jitsu. Like the more competitively focused you are, the more you might want to very rarely use things with very little and no resistance.
Yeah.
Like, like we talked about with the sit out, there's use cases sometimes.
Yeah.
Right. And only though to start exploring that area, right? Because what we don't want is like, okay, now it's like, oh, getting good at a sit out is like Brenn's best thing. So, now every day for the next 3 months, you're going to practice sit outs with no resistance and like explore different sit outs for 3 months with no resistance.
Exactly.
Not going to be productive. But to do it once for 5 minutes, and then now maybe a little bit less constrained tasks with more resistance, and then now we're working front headlocks. We're working all sorts of front headlock tasks, with full resistance, with all the things open. That can be much more productive, right?
That is music to my ears, Bren. You know how long I've been talking about this sport, just saying this, just waiting for someone to agree with me. But I know like you're not like as like, I don't know, for it as I am, but like it just feels nice for someone smart like you just to say, you're not an idiot, Jordan. You know, yeah, you're okay.
Yeah, and again, like to the extent that you want to explore moves and be good at moves, like there's no reason why, like for instance, like the rolling back takes from a movement perspective, I would love for people to be good at that.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? Rolling is this whole category of movement that is so important across so many different fields and disciplines.
Yeah.
That for a movement athlete or student, I would love for them to explore that. Even if it's not really going to help them in a jiu-jitsu competition, even if we knew that for a fact.
Yeah,
that's still productive, right?
Yeah.
From that perspective. Like, and who can say that's wrong? Like, is that a wrong perspective to have these different values where you want to be able to do different movements and you want to be able to do some cool movements?
Exactly. Right. Because a lot of people find that fun.
Yeah.
I find doing rolling back tacks fun. Like,
yeah,
I like that. I like
fucking
having
cool.
It is, right? I like getting my style points, you know, like I like putting on a show kind of, but like, yeah, it's just interesting when it comes to like specific techniques because like, yeah, I just think that they can just be helpful. I don't know. Like, yeah,
Sure.
I don't know.
There's definitely times, and I'll also say I think Rob Gray talks a lot about giving demonstrations.
Yeah, yeah.
He does that a lot as well.
I find Rob Gray a little more like nuanced than like some of the more hardcore people in the jiu-jitsu scene. It's tough. Like I'm trying to learn about eco, and like the eco jiu-jitsu guys are saying like one thing, and then it seems like Rob Gray is like saying another thing that's a little more relaxed.
Sure.
So it's hard to really figure out. And it's like, guys, I've done the reading, but they act so dumb. I don't understand eco. I'm trying my best. I don't want to complain too much. That's one thing. Anytime I talk about eco, I'm going to do two things. I'm going to talk about how much I still think that some unresisted stuff is good, and how annoyed I get by the eco community being assholes towards me. Public enemy number one for no reason. But hopefully that'll change. Probably not.
Hopefully so.
I think maybe from this podcast they'll see, okay, yeah, Jordan's like, he's came around a bit. Or they might do the opposite. They might be like, he still thinks unresisted things are good. Static driller, IP.
Again, it's not about like what task you do, right? It's about the understanding that underlies what you do.
Yes, exactly.
And those are totally different things.
Exactly. If you have like two main things you want to get across to traditional coaches out there, like what would you tell them?
Traditional jiu-jitsu coaches?
Yeah, without getting to like super sciencey, but like, would you encourage them to just like try it out, go for it, like do a mix to start, or like how do you kind of go about transitioning to the ecological approach as a coach? Like what's the, obviously read the books, but
I think reading the books is a hard sell. Of course, like, if you're up for it, like for the love of God, it's so good. You'll get so much out of it. But like for people that are on the fence or like considering, I think that's a tough thing to like, hey, why don't you spend 10 hours reading this fairly academic textbook?
Yeah, that's why Rob Gray's books aren't as bad. I know you recommended to me The Constraints-Led Approach. I bought it. I intended to read it, but I'm just
Dynamics of Skill Acquisition.
Yeah, that one. Yeah, it was just too dry.
It's tough. Yeah. It's tough. But what I love about that one is it's really well referenced. So you can dig into the claims for people that really want to go deep. But for the traditional coaches, I think maybe one thing is if you want to optimize for performance and learning in sparring, that's what you want. Try focusing on that, focusing on getting people good at sparring and the movements and skills and everything that happens during sparring and things with full resistance, not what happens without resistance, not the movements where you're telling them you're trying to do a specific thing and the partner is allowing it. I think when you have that focus of a representative environment you will naturally gravitate towards using more tasks with full resistance and giving feedback where necessary and showing demonstrations where necessary and where helpful. I think when you have that perspective, that itself will just bring you towards this if you just pay attention to what happens and how much more people improve.
Yes.
Like if you just watch what happens when they spar, and then you show them a movement, and then you tell them to drill it, and then you have them spar again, is it really that different? Does it really improve that much?
Yeah.
And we all know the answer is no.
Exactly.
We all know the answer is no. And then the thing is just, oh, well, it's hard, so it's going to take a long time, and we need to just practice. Well, it is hard. It's absolutely hard. And we can get much faster, more effective results by using tasks in that representative environment, using the full resistance. And think about, and you can even just give them the full resistance and say, try doing a sit out. Here's what it looks like.
Yeah.
But like now go back to the sparring, as opposed to let's now practice the sit out and make it look like this. And I think again, like using the full resistance, using the task, taking that time where you were having people drill something over and over and like work for an aesthetic perfection on that ideal thing, taking that time and putting that time into something with full resistance, it's going to be so much more productive. Even if it's just situational sparring, even if it's just open rounds. And then when you start refining, oh, how do I tinker with the constraints to help people search and explore and develop skill based on what they're doing and what they're not doing and what they're struggling with, then you're going to have an even more effective approach. And then all that's left is, taking down the old ideas of mental representations and motor programs.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I agree. Like, I think for people kind of on the fence, just like try it. And I don't think you need to go like full in just because that's a hard thing to do.
It's a huge, especially if you already have an academy.
Exactly. But maybe just find like one area, like maybe like do takedowns only CLA for a while, and like, but everything else just keep it the same if you want to, that's fine. Or maybe like submissions, like you do them only CLA, but like, because I just think it's not good to like tell someone their practice can't be good if they just kind of do a mix of it when they're on the fence. I think it's just a tough thing. And yeah.
Well, yeah, because it's like we were talking about, they're different things, right? It's like, it's one thing to say hybrid approach. Like, again, a hybrid approach at a theoretical level doesn't exist.
Exactly.
But that does not mean that if you have this approach with like some drilling and sparring, that you can't add more tasks in and have that be more productive. Like, that's what we're saying. Like, the more tasks you have in there, the more productive it's going to be. And if you're starting at 0 and you go to 10%, that's going to be a lot better.
Yeah.
This is significantly better. And so what we're saying is not like, trust us, this is the thing, like, just do it. Try it for yourself. It is legitimately better. If you legitimately try it, you will legitimately see it is not even close. It is dramatic. And maybe it doesn't even have to be like, just try it with a small amount of positions. Maybe just take a few students and say, hey, you three, let's try this experiment for a little bit. And then and just watch, like, how much do they improve compared to the other people on those areas that you're experimenting in. And you'll see it.
100%. That's what I think people need to do, is just see it, right? Which is why I think that, just doing maybe, again, just like, I think takedowns are a great spot to like see of like static drilling entries into like a single leg or a double leg. That never translates to an actual sparring match, but you get people just doing simple tasks of like grab a leg, grab both legs. You're going to see these things emerge. Exactly. And you're going to see them get way more comfortable on the feet compared to what they were before, because they have so many touches in a live environment. So I think the best way to convince someone is to have them see it with their own eyes. Yeah. And then when it comes to people that do eco, what would your best advice be right now? I assume you don't overconstrain, but
Well, yeah. So just to go back for a second, with those traditional coaches, if they're trying, they're willing to try the experiment, right? Put it to use. I would say for them, don't add too many. You're going to be so tempted to use constraints to try to force movements to emerge, to try to force techniques to emerge. And then you're going to be so tempted to judge the performance and learning based on, did the techniques emerge? Don't do that. Just judge it by, were they more successful?
Exactly.
Did they get more, not how did the takedowns look, was it a good looking single leg or was it a good looking double leg? Did they successfully take down their partner? Did they successfully pass the guard? And are they doing that more often and improving faster than the people that you're trying to teach the ideal pattern to?
Exactly, man, 100%. And then, yeah, with people that are already doing eco, don't fucking overconstrain.
Use less, err on the side of using less constraints.
Yeah.
Transitions need to be everywhere. You cannot just have win conditions. You can do it sometimes, but as your default, the win conditions cannot be the moment XYZ happens. If it's not submissions, you win the moment it happens. Anything else takes a few seconds. For those things, we need to keep the transitions in. We need to, it can't be you get on top. You win when you get on top. You win when you get on top and you hold your partner down. And for those 2 seconds in that transition, bottom player, the person that's getting swept, you fight like hell.
Exactly.
If we have a performance and competition focus, if that's what we want, if we have a recreational focus, we want to have fun, whatever, screw it, fine, have fun, whatever's fun for you. But if you want a performance focus, you want to optimize for learning and performance in competition and how do people do in sparring, we need those transitions in the tasks. That needs to be in default for these tasks. And then when we have that, then what we'll see is what should have been happening from the get-go, which is that the people using the ecological approach are far more skilled in the transitions and scrambles than people using traditional approaches. There's no reason why that shouldn't be the case.
Exactly. And your recommendation for that is a time constraint of 2 seconds. That's why I say 3 seconds. It has to be 3 seconds because if you just give up as soon as they, then you're not going to, it's not going to be realistic.
Yeah. At least 2, maybe 3. Sometimes I like significant advancement.
Yeah, that makes sense too.
It's just if you keep going, because for instance, let's say, if you swept me, right? And then, okay, so you come on top, but maybe you come on top in a way where you could pass my guard immediately.
Yeah.
If we stop there, because you held me down for 2 seconds, I don't get any of that information that I was playing guard in a way where you could have just passed, right? That's really useful and critical. So if we say significant advancement, and then it's if it's 2 to 3 seconds where there's no significant advancement happening, that does 2 really good things. One, it incentivizes you to keep going, to keep making things happen continuously, which is really valuable. And then 2, it also gives me more opportunities, or the losing player, to attune to more critical kind of mistakes.
Yeah.
Of okay, when I get swept, because more things are going to happen, right? When you get swept, it's going to be hard to have a good guard in place, right? You're probably going to be in a bad position. How do you make it not a bad position? That's important. If we just say hold your player down for 2 seconds, they're not really learning that, right? They're only learning, okay, I either have to get up or or I can't get up. Not how do I ideally prevent points from being scored, but then also ideally prevent my guard from getting passed immediately or not get submitted after that, right? All of those things in that pathway, time is a continuous flow, right? We're generally thinking in these discrete things and breaking up these tasks and situations into discrete packages. But jiu-jitsu is continuous. And then when we're isolating those sections, that's when we're running into a lot of problems.
Yeah, and I think that could actually create bad habits of someone not following through with what they're doing and whatnot, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some people think that bad habits don't exist.
I'm kind of there.
Yeah.
I'm kind of there. Okay. There's certainly not skillful habits. There's certainly habits that are unproductive, right? And that's what attractors are, right? Oh, well, attractors are any sort of habits, basically. So
good
a lot
or
of
bad.
Good or bad. So that's generally skillful things, and it's also unskillful things. It's just tendencies. What I'm not so much sold on is the idea that in doing tasks and in doing movements that we're getting worse. I rarely see that.
Okay.
What do you what does that make you think?
I mean, that's one thing I mean, I kind of agree with that like doing tasks, you're not going to get any worse by like doing a game that doesn't really make sense. You probably won't make you any worse, but I think there's definitely some things that you can do repeatedly that are going to screw you over that like probably be better if you didn't do those things.
Like what?
Let's just say like, I don't know, like from close guard, like putting your hands on the mat, like when you're on top.
Oh,
right? Kimura, hip hop sweep, right?
Sure. Yeah, that's what I would call an unproductive attractor for sure. Yeah.
So, could you also label it a bad habit or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, but I would. Yeah, you could do that, and then, but the thing is, I think a critical thing, because I have like a little bit of a pet peeve about this, because I feel like in movement, so many teachers use that as a justification of like, why you need to train with me.
Yeah.
Because like, if you just train on your own, you're gonna have all these bad habits, you're gonna get injured, and so you need to train with me because I'm gonna teach you properly and these proper movement patterns, proper functional pattern, blah 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 blah, right? And there's really no evidence for it. Like there's no evidence for that direction of it.
I agree with you. I agree 100%. I think a lot of people overemphasize like bad habits of like, oh, I didn't learn it like the right way, and I don't want to like develop bad habits because of that. But like mostly, you're probably going to self-organize away from those.
Yes. Yes.
Most people do, but definitely some people just like can't get it through their heads to like change something.
Sure.
But I don't think it's
the attractor can stay sometimes, right? Exactly. When you leave the game too open.
Yeah, and even just like, I know some people that have been training years and still give me the underhook all the time from like when they're trying to pass, which again we talked about earlier isn't always a bad thing, but it always screws them over.
You always take it.
Yeah, that's the thing. Exactly. Yeah. So that's the thing too. Like, how can you really tell if it's a bad habit or not? Maybe he's doing a good job against other people, but like now we're putting him in tougher constraints and seeing if the skills hold up, and they don't.
Tougher constraints or tougher opponents?
Well, would it be the same thing?
You could, yeah. Like there's environmental constraints. You could call an opponent an environmental constraint.
Yeah, because that's the way I think of it, at least of like, you test out skills under different constraints, including physical constraints of being a different person, right? So yeah, when he goes against me, no luck, but either way, it's gonna happen.
Yeah, but like. Yeah, the way I would see that, it's an unproductive attractor, and some people just aren't able to capitalize on it. Like it's probably an unproductive attractor. Like there could be some functional use for it sometimes, but like if you're taking advantage of it for sure, and you're like, dude, like you just put your hand on him, I just triangled you. It's like because you gave me the triangle, because putting your hand on him is basically giving me the triangle.
Exactly.
But then now like you could do a task where it's like, all right. Like we're playing close guard, and I'm gonna try to triangle. Like, don't let me triangle you, and you can put your hands wherever you want.
Yeah.
Try it though. Like,
exactly.
Just try to put your hand on the mat, right? And like you're gonna triangle him a bunch of times, and probably pretty quickly he's gonna learn. Oh, that's not a good idea.
Could this make sense to highlight it in a way where like you can only put your hands on the mat?
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly. And then you just submit them a whole bunch of times. It's like, oh yeah, that was really tough. And then also, but then that allows another thing, which is like where it gets interesting maybe is there's ways to put your hands on the mat and not put your hands on. There's ways to like to do it where it's more or less productive. And then there's things that could be more or less productive after you put your hand on the mat.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And if the game is like, yeah, put your hands on, exaggerate the error and still find a solution. Yeah, that could be useful. Right? Even if it's just to really reinforce that that's a terrible idea that you shouldn't be doing.
Yeah, exactly. So how I want to end this, I guess we've had a great conversation. It's just with our hot takes when it comes to
Okay.
eco. If you want, I can go first so you
Uh-huh.
can like think of
Okay.
yours more. And I guess I don't know. My hot take is that it doesn't really matter that much of like, in a sense, like people are going to get good regardless, I think. And like trying to maximize every minute of the practice, I think that they're probably going to get good at jiu-jitsu either way. But like not where like it doesn't matter at all and like, just do traditional because there's other problems where it's like boring doing static drilling, whatever. But like you see good guys out of traditional gyms, you see crappy guys out of eco gyms. And when I've rolled with people from eco gyms, they're good, but they're not, it's not like this like big massive skill difference between a traditional gym. It feels the same to me. It feels like identical, like it's just another gym. So like in terms of skill acquisition, yeah, I think you will get better faster. I think yeah, you'll get better in general. But at the same time, people get good at jiu-jitsu regardless. I don't know. And a good example is like myself of like I only had an instructor. I was only at a gym for 3.5 years, and I opened up my own gym, and I've just been by myself basically since then, which is kind of like an ecological approach because like I've just been rolling to get better, and while watching a lot of instructionals and like teaching, I felt like it's made me better. But regardless of the circumstances, I think if I went to eco gym, if I went to the traditional gym the whole time or my own gym, I would have got just as good as jiu-jitsu. Like I think, but I don't know. What do you think about
That's
that?
a hot take. Yeah. I I'm curious though, like when you say it's not a big difference, does that include like where I would look for it the most is with beginners
Yeah, yeah.
and specifically with the progress to the beginners. I
Right,
mean,
you're right. Yeah.
like I think that's where it'd be most obvious. Do you not see? I feel like I see a big difference.
No, I do. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think in beginners, absolutely. Because I think, for example, my youth class, they're way better now than they ever were at using CLA. But there's definitely some traditional gyms out there that they could kick my kids' asses,
Sure.
just
Sure. Sure.
because they're just more about competition, that kind of stuff.
Right.
And like, yeah, they're just more of the culture. So it's not that I think it doesn't matter. It's just more so I don't think it's to some like definitive thing.
Right. Right. Right.
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh, you know what I think is going on there is competitiveness is huge for
Yeah,
representativeness.
absolutely.
Like, and so you can have an ecological gym, but it's very casual. And
Yes.
so, okay, we're using representative design. We're doing all the sparring with full resistance, but that full resistance is not all that high compared to like a high level competition. And so you could have a traditional gym where it's like, okay, yeah, we're doing all this drilling, not representative at all. But then when we spar, we go hard.
Absolutely.
And there's a lot of gyms like that. And that hard is with other really competitive people and highly representative of high level competitions. And I think what you're seeing there is like that competitiveness makes a huge difference where you can have an ecological gym that maybe like just not a very competitive culture. And yeah, maybe the people aren't all that good compared to like a traditional gym where they're super competitive and like people go to train there and like they're, I don't know, training 8 hours a day or whatever. It's dropping out of high school and just doing jujitsu.
Absolutely. Actually, a good example is like Mendez brothers. Like they have
Yep.
so many killer kids, absolute killers, and they must be doing something right, but they're not doing eco.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's interesting, I
Yeah.
think.
I think culture is a big factor.
Absolutely. Yeah. And like cuz I do think like I think I have good guys, like I have some good adults, youth, everyone, but like we're not a super competitive gym. It's more like relaxed, have a good time, and like that's the way I like it. And yeah, I think CLA is more fun. I think it's more productive overall. But I think that, yeah, just if you want your gym to be competitive and have a bunch of killers, it might not. It doesn't always matter. It just like, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
hot take.
Yeah. But again, I'm not like I like Eco. I like CLA. I think it's great.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. But okay, what's your hot
Oh,
take?
I think I got quite the quite the one. I'm trying to think of how to word this. I think my hot take would be the way most coaches, I don't mean this in any offensive or negative way, but I genuinely think the way, let's not say most, but a lot of coaches are using the CLA in Jiu-Jitsu right now in an ecological approach, it would be more productive for skill acquisition if they were just doing situational sparring and more
Yeah.
open rounds.
That is a hot take. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's because they're over constraining.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, if they're not over constraining, that would be very different. That shouldn't always be the case.
Exactly.
But I mean, again, situational sparring is a seal. Like it's modifying constraints, it's tasks, right? And then it's an ecological approach when it's done with a certain understanding. But to have an ecological approach, an understanding of ecological dynamics, and then just do situational sparring. Yeah, I think it would be more productive than the way it very often is happening right now for skill acquisition.
I agree. And, you know, a good example I think is guard passing, just because I think that like there's so many ways to pass the guard. And I think so many CLA games for guard passing I've seen are just like
inside position.
Yeah. They're just like very like targeted of what you're supposed to do and just aren't open enough. And I'd rather just do positional sparring in that case, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. But like I already said, I just want to roll anyway. So I'm more of like an anomaly, I guess. But yeah, that was a great conversation, Bren. I thoroughly enjoyed that. And I think I had the most productive ecological discussion I've ever had with anyone. So thank you for that. And yeah, just thanks again.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you being here.
It was a lot of fun.